Next, I would like to introduce our panel guests. This evening, I'm going to start with the town side. As the last two sessions, I started with the school administration. So I'd like to introduce on the panel, Joe McCrisky, Chair of the Select Board, Deborah Roberts, Vice Chair, Select Board, Stephen Cavey, Select Board, Scott Carrara, Select Board, Dr. Robin Grimm, our Town Manager, Stephanie Carrara, Town Clerk, Lauren Goldberg, Town Council, KP Law, Bill Rowe, Town Accountant, Mark Tisdale, Executive Director of Development Services, Ed Trumpio, Chair of the Finance Committee, Bob Desmond, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Now on the school side, we have Sandra Gropey, Chair, Stoughton School Committee, Katie Pina Enochian, Vice Chair, Stoughton School Committee, Anita Hill, Member of Stoughton School Committee, and Joseph McDonough, Stoughton School Committee. We have Dr. John Marcus, our Superintendent, Stoughton Public Schools, Jonathan Ford, Deputy Superintendent from the Stoughton Public Schools, Kathy Piatelli, Business Manager from the Stoughton Public Schools, and Joyce Husseini, Facilities Director from the Stoughton Public Schools. We also have the chairs of the standing committees to read the recommendations from their respective committees. Agavan Schumacher, Chair, Intergovernmental Relations, Cynthia Walsh, Chair for Municipal Operations, and Carolyn Campbell, Chair of Municipal Regulations. Also on our panel this evening are the precinct chairs to provide for improved precinct representation. Mark Zemanian, Precinct 1, George Stalinski, Precinct 2, Richard Fitzgerald, Precinct 3, Julie Gito, Precinct 4, Carmel Drews, Precinct 5, Karen Klipp, Precinct 6, Diane Dolan, Precinct 7, and David Sheehan, Precinct 8. We also supported technically by the MAPC, which is the Mass Area Planning Council. Now in the larger room, we have our elected town meeting representatives who are collectively the town of Stoughton's legislative body. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to our panelists and all our town meeting representatives. Present at Town Hall with me are the following: Stephanie Carrara, our town clerk, Lauren Goldberg, our town council from KP Law, Stephen Cavey, Stoughton Select Board, Mark Zemanian, Chair, Precinct 1, Trish Thropshire, Director, IT Department. We also have Cynthia Walsh, Town Meeting Representative, Precinct 2, and the Chair of Municipal Operations. She's here due to she has no computer access. And we also have Phyllis Kelleher, Town Meeting Representative from Precinct 2. She's also here because she has no computer access. So at this point in time, I welcome everybody. And I also like to tell you, we're going to do a poll for attendance. We're going to do a poll a little differently. It was a suggestion from one of the town meeting reps, and I think hopefully it works out well. So we can present poll number 1, and we're going to ask you just succinctly, what precinct are you in? So once the poll comes up, we'll give you about 30 seconds. That's going to be poll number 1. And just answer the question. I hope you all know your precinct number. Just click on the precinct number, and only town meeting representatives, please vote. If you're not a town meeting representative, please leave the screen alone. They'll just cause problems for electronic voting. So you have 30 seconds. Please begin voting now. George, I'll get you in one moment. I know you have your hand up, George. Just give me a moment. And also Robert Cohn. Let's unmute George Stalinski. George, do you have a an issue with the poll?
No, Mr. Moderator, thank you. George Stalinski, Precinct 2. Just proudly wanted to report that Precinct 2 has 21 members present and accounted for.
George, thank you very much. Please put your hand down, please. Mr. Bob Cohn, can we unmute Bob Cohn? Bob Cohen, if you can just mute yourself, state your name and precinct number.
Bob Cohn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir. Precinct number?
Precinct 5. When you put that poll up, it just said precinct 5. Is that all you did was press 5 and
Yes,
send it
just
on?
click on precinct 5. That's your precinct.
Send it on?
And submit
Okay.
it.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome, sir. All right, I believe that's enough time to determine which precinct number you're in. Can we close the poll and share the results, please? And we need to see the count, the numbers. Okay, for precinct 1, I only see 16. For precinct 2, I see 18. Precinct 3, I see 15. Precinct 4, I see 17. Precinct 5, I see 18. Precinct 6, I see 17. Precinct 7, I see 13. And precinct 8, I see 16. Right. George, I know you said you had 21.
Yes, sir, Mr. Moderator. I've checked the attendance list very carefully. I've gone over that list a number of times.
All right, well,
Already there.
I believe we have enough for a quorum. Could we have a count? Yeah, how much we need for a quorum? We need 66 for a quorum. We have 130? Yeah, we just added up the people who clicked on the precincts. It's 130. All right, so we will do a report on this poll and see what the issues are, if there are any. Could be that people just did not click on the poll. All right, let's clear the poll. Okay, we have Dr. Tucker was not able to vote as present in the attendance poll. Can we note that Dr. Tucker is present? Stephanie, did you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, from precinct 8, so we will notify that. The town clerk has acknowledged. And we have a message here from Dave Laurie, precinct 6. He's present also. Stand by, please. We're gonna, I was asked to do the poll again for poll number 1. So could we clear poll number 1? And we just need for 2 minutes. And while we're taking those 2 minutes, as I mentioned, we're doing this by Zoom webinar. And let me just mention a couple other procedural motions are still in effect from session 1, from May 3rd. Procedural motions are still in effect. As we take a few minutes to give you a couple other action items here. Points of order, please put them in the Q&A. And we have the Q&A being monitored by Stephen Cavey for points of order. As soon as Mr. Cavey sees a point of order, he will bring it to my attention, and depending upon the point of order, I will address it immediately. To speak on a budget article, a budget department, or an article as we proceed into the warrant, please raise your hand, And on the left side of the screen, you will see the queue that lists all the town meeting reps that raise their hands. And those are the people who will be on the speaker list. Mark Zemaning is monitoring this process, and he will also notify me of any town meeting reps that raise their hands to speak on an issue or an article. Okay, as we go along in the budget process, I will obviously give you the department number and the page number and department name and who raised their hand on the Q&A to talk on that department. And that actually opens up that department for other town meeting reps to speak on. All right, let's see where we are on the poll. I'm just waiting for the poll to be put up. I also have a message here. John Rocker, Precinct 3 is present. Okay, Eric Anderson stepped away while the poll was being run, so he's from Precinct 2. All right. I think we're gonna present that poll again. We'll do it one more time. It's about 7:13 p.m. And can we have poll number 1 presented on the screen, please, when you're ready? Here we are. Here's poll number 1. This is our attendance. Which precinct are you in? Town meeting reps. Please vote accordingly, depending upon which precinct you're in. Please begin voting now. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
Mr. Trumpio, go ahead.
Just tell some of the people, you slide up the poll, the submit buttons below the line on some of the people. They may not see it down there.
One more
So,
time, Ed.
huh?
What you said, sir?
On the poll, you just move it up a little bit once you pick your precinct, and the submit button's down below. Depending on how big your screen is, it cuts off the submit button.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Ed. What Ed mentioned to everybody is, depending upon your device, if you can't find your precinct, just slide up the poll a little bit on your screen or move it around till you see your precinct and vote accordingly. Thank you. All right, 10 more seconds. Yeah, you do have to submit, click on submit to record the response to the poll. You have to click on submit. All right, could we also have we're sharing the results now. Can you also show the numbers? All right, from precinct 1, we still have 16, precinct 2, 19, 20. Okay, we have 20. One for Stephanie Carrara, so 20. Precinct 3, we have 19. Precinct 4, 18. Precinct 5, 19. Precinct 6, we have 21. Precinct 7, 14. And precinct 8, 17. Stephanie, you want to report the number?
Yeah, we have 144 town meeting members present.
Are you unmuted?
I'm sorry. Mr. Moderator, we have 144 town meeting members present, and the voting is 973.
So the clerk reports 147 members present? I'm sorry, 144 present. And 73 is the quorum. So now we proceed with our meeting. And just a few more notes. We are in the budget. That's Article 16, and we'll start with Information Systems, Department Number 155, which appears on page 23 of the warrant books. I'd just like to mention that we're starting off in the technical, non-debatable questions. I ask that you ask questions. Please don't provide any statements or comments at this time. There'll be a section after the non-debatable questions called the pro and con debate. That's where you can make a statement if you so desire. Again, I ask you only to ask questions and to ask each member to ask only 2 questions, and just for the time involved, 2 questions, and please no cross debate. Ask the moderator if you want to ask for town council, the town manager, go through the moderator, please, and vice versa. The moderator will ask the appropriate person to respond. Then you're going to ask your second follow-up question. Then I'm going to move on to the next speaker in the queue. Again, please do not make any statements. I'll cut you off. I don't want to do that. And so we're going to just start going now. So there was 13 from the second session on May 5th. We ended up with the town manager being the last department that we finished on. So that is closed now. And as I mentioned, the information system IT department is the next section. That's Department 155 on page 23. And the people I have on the list here, start with Pat Colburn. Can we bring in Pat Colburn? When you come into the panel, could you please state your name and precinct number, then ask your question.
Pat Colburn, Precinct 4. Mr. Moderator, I do have a question on the IT department, but weren't we supposed to start with central purchasing on page 14, since that came after? I'm sorry.
I don't see anybody having a hold on that.
Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry.
In fact, Pat, if
Right.
I can just have you hold on a second. I have a raised hand for a point of information. Carmel Drews, I'd like to recognize Carmel Drews right now. Carmel, please state your name and precinct number and your point of information.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Carmel Drews, Precinct 5. And I know we're in the midst of the budget, and I also know it's a complicated process and a lot of people are somewhat unfamiliar with it. So I'm hoping that we can save time in the long run by clarifying a few things in advance. So I'm hoping that you could speak to or answer 3 points, one of which would be, what would a member of this body do if they took issue with a section of the budget? What would be the procedure for doing something about that? The second question is, will we be voting on each section the way we're discussing each section, or will we be voting on the budget as a whole? And then the third question would be, what would happen if the budget didn't pass at this time in this meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. I can answer the first of those questions. Right now, we're voting on the holds that people on the second session, May 5th, asked to hold certain budgets as we read through the entire budget. Bill Rowe read through the budget, and town meeting reps typed in hold. So only those departments are we going to basically debate and even vote on if needed. The second part is if there's a change in that particular department, motion has to be made, voted on, and depending upon what the motion is, I don't want to theorize or hypothesize anything, but depending upon what the motion is, there are certain issues that may occur, and we can get into those if that occurs. But if you want to change that department number, dollar amounts, that motion has to reflect that. And then we'll have to get into, if it's X number of dollars is taken off away from it, then the main motion will have to reflect that on Article 16. Will be reflected too. And I would ask Bill Rowe to be, recognize Bill Rowe, if you can talk on what happens if we don't pass the budget or the entire budget. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. Bill Rowe, Town Accountant. So if we were unable to pass a budget by June 30th, similar to what we did last year, we could petition the Department of Revenue for a 112 budget for the month of July. And we could make additional petitions, assuming that a budget had not been approved by the end of July. And that would be 1/12 of the fiscal 21 level.
Okay,
That would be our petition. That, and again, that would have to be approved by the Director of Accounts, the head of the Bureau of Accounts of the Division of Local Services.
Thank you very much. I think that helps people with their decision-making around how to approach discussion of the budget and also their own votes. So
okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bill Rowe, and thank you, Carmel. All right, let's go back to Pat Colburn. Pat, Information Systems, page 23, department number 155. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the town manager, I believe. My question is about the communications specialist position. I understand that's a new position, and I believe Dr. Grimm had said she'd already filled it several months ago. My questions are, how did we create a new position and fill it without town meeting approval? And was this position posted with qualifications, et cetera? Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Grimm, go ahead, please. We can answer that.
So, first of all, the town routinely brings people in. The obligation that the town manager can restructure and structure government as necessary. I can bring people in under temporary wages, salary line items, provided that I do not increase the budget, which I did not increase the budget of that particular department. There was money within the salary line item to bring in someone to see how a communication specialist would work. We had a person who was voluntarily doing this work prior. We also have had interns prior. With COVID, we were no longer able to really get any consistency with interns. And the person who'd been volunteering, we were going to expand the scope of, so we had money in the salary line item and we brought her in under that. The process is that when I go to add the position into the budget, it goes in front of town meeting, which it is now. So last year, we didn't increase the budget. It fell right within the line item of what we had. This year, because I'm asking for an allocation for it, it goes in front of town meeting as an expansion of that budget.
If I could then just follow up with that, potentially to legal, Mr. Moderator, I was always under the impression that we could not add new positions without town meeting approval. And this is essentially a position that was added and filled that was outside of the normal process. And I'm just trying to make sure that that's something that's acceptable. It seems like we're being asked to approve something that's already done. So I would appreciate some clarification.
Let me ask town council to weigh in on that.
Thank
Town
you.
council?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think that's what's being brought before town meeting tonight, is the question of whether to fund that line, and that's an appropriate way to bring this matter forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then my understanding is that we can create a new position outside of town meeting, fill it outside of the normal process, and that's okay per legal. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I have a point of order from Dick Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald, can you unmute yourself and ask your point of order?
Mr. Moderator, I took that down. It was
Okay.
I wanted to make sure we were starting on the right page.
Okay. Jess Minor? Can we bring in Jess Minor? Jess, when you come in, please put your name and precinct number, please.
Jess Minor, Precinct 5. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Just a follow-up question to Pat's question on that. I guess the question I have is, since the position has already been created and filled, what would happen to the person who has been hired into the position if town meeting didn't vote this up, since that person has already been hired? And then I guess I also have a question about this sort of in the larger picture, related to HR practices. So I guess I'm trying to figure out whether or not there's any requirements for the town of Stoughton to post positions, to make them available to other people, to go through a process where everyone has an equal chance to apply to positions, to be reviewed, selected, to these sorts of things, just because I've heard repeatedly that we have commitments to trying to work toward issues of diversity and inclusion in the town, but you know, I'm not understanding whether or not our town is following a process where we're posting positions and making the opportunities available to others. So I just wanted a little bit of an additional clarification on those points. Thank you.
Okay, Jess, Dr. Robin Grimm, could we have an answer for that?
So in answer to the question, if town meeting doesn't fund the position, I eliminate the position. It's not a permanent position. It's a part-time position. It's no different than we bring in temporary poll workers, election workers. We bring in part-time help into any department that needs it at any given time. So that's not unusual. The fact that we already had the money in the salary line item because we had a little extra money in the line item in that department meant that we had the funding. If town meeting chooses not to put that funding in this year because we had extra in that line, in that department for any number of reasons of non-spending, this year we don't have that extra budgeted, I just eliminate the position. This was a unique one. We do post all positions, typically all full-time positions are posted. They're posted internally first as is expected and then externally. We are actively moving toward diversity. We have been advertising on diverse sites. In cases, we've actually paid money to advertise on diversity websites. This particular position, as I said, I had somebody volunteering and had done it on a volunteer level and done very well. And we just simply wanted to expand the position. It's sort of a unique skill set. And at this point, it was a person who was already doing the job for free, and it seemed appropriate to give them a salary for doing what they had been doing, and they were going to expand the scope. But yeah, we do follow all diversity practices.
Thank you. You all set, Jess? Okay, I think you are.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Also on that department was John Anzavino. Can we bring in John Anzavino? And John, when you come in, please ask your question. Excuse me, state your name, precinct number, and your question.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, John Anzavino, Precinct 4. My question has actually been asked, which had to do with this new position. Although I thought there was something in the bylaws that said no new positions could be added outside of town meeting. So whether there was funding or not, I don't agree that you can just add.
Okay, John, please ask your question.
Well, I just say, my question was, how do they do it? If the bylaw says you cannot add positions outside of town meeting, the position's already been added, but.
Okay, so let's see if I get that answered. Is there a bylaw that says you can't add?
I did not add a position into the budget. I can bring in people on temporary, I can bring in short-term employees. And if I want to make that position a permanent position in the budget, I come to town meeting, which is what I am doing tonight.
Okay.
If the town meeting doesn't vote it, the position, I just don't fund that position and it goes away.
Then my comment on that, Mr.
No
Moderator.
comments, John. Questions only right now.
All right, my question is, how do we hire people when there's no job descriptions or any postings for the position? That's my question.
Okay, second question then, okay.
I believe I answered that. This was a unique position where a person had been doing the job voluntarily.
Okay, thank you both.
All right, and Bob, I had put in a Q&A, just that, a point of information.
Regarding the residents?
Huh?
Regarding residents?
Yes, did you get that?
Yes, I did, thank you. I want to make a comment right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. John Anzavino. What John is referring to is, and I'll state it right here, any registered voter who wishes to comment on any articles can call the help desk 781-232-9248, and we will try to accommodate you. But town meeting reps first have the right to ask the questions. All right, is there anybody else that'd like to ask questions regarding Department 155 Information Systems? I do see two more hands. Larry Sawyer, can we bring in Mr. Larry Sawyer? Larry, when you brought in Lawrence, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Hi, this is Larry Sauer, Precinct 2.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Just did have a question about that new position that was added. Is there currently a job description for that position?
Dr. Grimm?
We're working on actually job descriptions for all positions in town because many of them did not have it. What the position generally does is it allows us to streamline communication and push it out to the citizens. It does a Stoughton Town Crier. It handles all Instagram. It works with us on all the Facebook accounts, that position, and helps assist in keeping the website updated. I would also add that it does all of the same thing for the schools. We incorporate all school meetings and school information into
Dr.
this as
Grimm,
well.
can I, not to be rude or anything, he asked if, do you currently have a job description for that?
I'm just giving the description. I don't have a formal written one. As I said, we're in the process of doing those for every department and every job because the town does not have them.
Understood. Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Grimm.
so the answer is no.
Is there any, you have one more chance to have a question, Lawrence, Mr. Sawyer.
No, that's it. I just wanted to clarify that, make sure that I was getting the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Linda Girton. Linda, when you're brought in.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Marcus.
that's okay. I'm happy to take any questions for the schools.
Okay, but the school department was not held.
Understood, but Dr. Grimm, if you need to comment about anything on the schools, just let me know. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus. All right, next up is Linda Girton. Linda, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Linda Garden, Precinct 6. So this position that you are bringing in, is we voting on this to bring this in as a position in with the budget, or is this going to be something that's going to be separate?
Let me answer that, Dr. Grimm. This is the way we do things in the town of Stoughton is we look at the budget and the department numbers. We can ask to hold the department number, which this was held, information systems, and you could ask questions, clarify the information that you're looking to clarify, seek out the information you're looking to seek out, and then you can make a decision if you want to up the department number in dollars or decrease the department number in dollars. You have to make a motion and see if it gets passed. It's sort of like a little article, department number that has been held.
So I'd like to make a motion if we can. Is that out of order?
1 second. Right now we're doing technical questions,
Okay.
and you can do that right after we're done with technical questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with a technical question? Ed Trumpfield?
I just want to make a point of information for people. We vote the bottom line number for every department. So if you're going to make a change, you have to change the bottom line number by X amount of dollars for that budget. Because we do not vote salary separate or expenses separate. It's one bottom line number. Been doing it that way for many, many years. So if there are changes to be made, you have to change the total appropriation for that department.
Thank you, Ed. Next up is Reginald Nunnally. Let's bring in Mr. Nunnally. And Mr. Nunnally, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Reggie Nunnally, Precinct 1.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So essentially, this new position really won't be advertised because somebody is already filling it. Is that correct?
Dr. Grimm?
In this particular case, yes, the volunteer who had been doing it was moved into the position as a paid position. It had been an intern's position that we had gone to the colleges and looked for.
You have another question, Mr. Nunnally?
Are there other positions that have been filled in this manner in the past, or?
With part-time and temporary help, it happens a lot. We do it all the time for election workers and poll workers. We advertise when we can, and we typically do, but full-time positions are all posted and advertised.
All right, Mr. Nunnally?
And I should say some part-time positions when we have notice and it's just a normal advertising process. In this particular case, because the person had been doing it, we felt it was appropriate to pay her. That's what happened in this case.
Okay. That was your two questions, Mr. Nunnally. I'm just allowing two questions, two technical questions. Thank you, sir. You can ask a comment or questions later on in pro and con debate. Thank you, sir. Next up is Joseph McDonough. Joseph, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number.
Joseph McDonough, Precinct 6. My question is in reference to the creating of the position and the funding position. So there's been two different conversations about, just give me 1 second, bear with me. There's been two different conversations of this is our way of approving a position. And then we're talking about the bottom line. You can change the bottom line, but you can't change a position. So my question is are we approving this position right now? And are we funding it? Because if somebody makes a motion to reduce the bottom line, technically, if the money's still there for something else, it can be transferred to approve this position. So by reducing the funding from the bottom line doesn't get rid of the position. So is there a way for us to approve this position or turn this position down and fund it?
Ed Trumfield would like to answer that. Just unmute yourself.
I'm not sure. We've never done a specific line item or say zero it out. In all the years I've been around, it's always been the bottom line. So we'd have to ask council to talk to their budget expert to see if you can do it for one particular item only. I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'm not asking to get rid of that line item and zero out that line item, but previous speakers had asked, are we approving this position? And we were told that we're approving it through funding it. But that's not the same thing as if there is that approval through town meeting for a position. That is not the same thing as approving funding as it is for approving a position. So it's two different topics. I'm just trying to find out if that can still be, if that's still what's happening.
All right, let me ask town council for like a ruling on that. Town council?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. So town meeting's responsibilities with respect to the budget is with regard to the funding. So the funding is town meeting's area of expertise per se. The Finance Committee made recommendations about how to spend the town's money, and in that recommendation, there was funding provided for this particular position. I will say that the charter gives the town manager a lot of authority with respect to administrative or organizational issues, and it does not say anywhere, as far as I can tell, that there needs to be specific separate approval of any position.
Thank you, town council.
Mr. Moderator, one more. This is Dr. Marcus. Can I just make one more quick point of order?
Dr. Marcus, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just to clarify, the Stoughton Public Schools does have its own media specialist position, so I don't want folks to be confused that this is a school function. We have our own media specialist in our own budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus. So next up is Selectman Chair Joseph McCrisky. Mr. McCrisky, can you unmute yourself? You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to point out historically, a position filled like this has been done many times historically since I've been on the board for going into my 18th year, covering a time frame of 1992. And primarily it was with positions such as people taking minutes of meetings. They came in part-time and there was a very small salary. Positions were morphed, which the town manager does have express authority under the terms of the town charter. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I don't have it in front of me, to create, to reassign, to abolish departments, to, and be basically the head of every department in town. And, in that establishing positions as well. Then it comes down to this body, a legislative body, that if you want to fund the position, you take that vote. But as the chair of the Finance Committee mentioned, is that we vote now, not like we did years ago, where we would vote line item by line item. We now vote the bottom line, as is done in the school department budget as well, and gives the town manager the authority to keep that position if she so wishes, as long as she can stay within the budget that's provided her by the town meeting process. So this has been done before. It will happen in the future. A relatively smaller position that is not unlike, just stated by Dr. Marcus, not unlike what the school department has. We live in an information world now where people want to know what's going on before we even have time to react on it sometimes. It's a good position to have. It's a good position to keep people informed through social media, where a lot of talk is done. And unfortunately, sometimes through social media, as we all know, is that the information gets watered down or it gets filtered by whoever's presenting it. So to have our own person there for a relatively small amount of money, and it's not a full-time position where we're going to be spending millions of dollars in it, like the school department, it's very good to keep our residents informed. So that's all I have to add. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. I allowed Mr. McCarthy, even though he did not ask a question, point of privilege as the chair of the Board of Selectmen or Select Board. Next up is Mr. George Stalinski. George, when you come in, please state your name and precinct number. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. George Zelensky, Precinct 2, just a point of information. We're spending X amount of time working on talking about a $7,800.
George, is there a question in there?
Yeah, why are we wasting our time and there was no question or a hold on a school budget of 51?
George, you're out of order. Excuse me, Mr. Delansky.
Thank you.
Out of order. You have to have a question at this point. Next up is Mr. Lou Gito. Please bring in. Oh, you canceled? Okay. Next up is Scott Carrara. Please bring in Select Board Member Scott Carrara, please.
Can you hear me, Bob?
Yes, I can, Scott. Go ahead, sir.
Precinct 2 rep also. I don't know how to get to that point of information, but what I was going to say is if the board turns it, if town meeting turns this down, Dr. Grimm could just bring it back as like temporary again, as it was in there before. There's nothing against that. It'd almost be like consultant type. You know what I mean? So
this is a point of order for you, right?
Yeah, I'm just bringing some information out there that to help out that this could be filled because there's money in that department to do it temporarily, as Dr. Grimm said with other departments. So I think that's why, finance voted the way we did unanimously, that it was going to get filled either way, the way Dr. Grimm said she needed it.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Next up is Peter Brown. Peter Brown, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Brown, Precinct 2. I'm just a little confused here. Maybe I missed some of this conversation.
Question, please?
Yeah, I'm going to get to the question, and this is why I'm got to say what I'm saying. The process that we've gone through or have been going through for as many years I've been involved, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the town manager, does the town manager have the authority to establish this position, whether it be part-time or full-time, under the charter? I believe the answer is yes, and I'd like to ask the town manager if she believes so, that this is the case.
Hang on a minute. Let me ask town council. She can read a little something of the budget. Of the charter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So Chapter 4, Section 2 of the Town Charter specifically says, in accordance with the provisions of this charter and except as otherwise expressly prohibited by the general laws, the town manager shall have the authority to organize and reorganize, consolidate or abolish departments, commissions, boards, or offices under, it says his, but her direction and supervision in whole or in part, to establish new departments, commissions, boards, or offices as she deems necessary, and to transfer the duties, powers, and appropriation of one department, commission, board, or officer to another. All appointments to offices, boards, and commissions not specifically made under the power and duty of the selectmen by this charter and by the school committee under the general laws shall be made by the town manager. That really, in my view, resolves this question. The town manager has the right to create a position and has the right to use that funds that are available for it.
Person or the position?
Thank you, town council. All right, next up, Rick Coleman. Mr. Coleman, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5, through you to the town manager. Are we talking about a fifth of a position, a fifth time of a full-time position? Is that it? Hopefully, a one-word answer. Hopefully.
Yeah,
all right. Well, let me see if I can get the answer for you, Dr. Grimm.
Is it listed as .2 in the budget? If it's listed as .2, that's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
You all done, Mr. Coleman?
Yes, I am.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next up is Vaughn Enochian. When you bring in Mr. Vaughn Nokian, Vaughn, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Hi, Vaughn Anokian, precinct 4.
Yes, go ahead.
I just have a technical question.
Sure.
Could, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the town council, could you please clarify the section of the bylaw that says a new position or change in classification can only be effective if the town meeting approves the new position or change and provides funding?
All right, let me ask town council to weigh in.
Mr. Moderator, if the speaker has that reference to that section, I'd be happy to take a look at it. I don't have it at the ready.
Mr. Nokian, do you have the citation or the reference?
This was in a letter from the Finance Committee to town meeting back in 2018.
I don't know what you mean. When you say a letter from FinCom, FinCom sent it out or the FinCom received?
The Finance Committee had a letter in the warrant in 2018. It was a special 2-page letter from the Finance Committee discussing the raises and positions that year.
All right, I have a note here from Carolyn Campbell saying it's in the personnel bylaw. If we can have town council check that, if that's possible.
Thank you, Carolyn. And also, can I, Mr. Moderator, can I bring up a point of information? Can I please bring up a point of information?
Hang on 1 minute, Mr. Nokian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're just checking that bylaw.
Oh,
thank you.
Personnel bylaws, I'm looking.
Okay, we're checking on it.
In the meanwhile, can I bring up the point of information then?
There's a point of information, go ahead.
The Finance Committee did not unanimously support this department budget. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
All right, thank you. We're checking on the personnel bylaw.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Moderator, while you're doing that?
Graham?
Yeah, I believe there was a legal opinion given by Mr. Fair back in 2018 in response to that.
Hang on a second.
That bylaw
Dr.
question.
Graham, hang on, please. I'm just having town council that's present here.
Hold on. I am going to look for that letter. If there's a letter that Joe sent, I'll be able to find it. But I do want to point out that a personnel bylaw is not able to be inconsistent with a town charter. So the charter is going to take precedent over the over a personnel bylaw in any event. And if you just give me 1 second to
Sure. Well, we just stand by.
Here I am. Yep, I have it.
Mr. Moderator, I can help with that.
Well, let's hear from town council. It says it has to come back, it has to go to town council in the first place.
There was a question asked about whether the Finance Committee could, during its review of the proposed budget for FY19, make binding adjustments to the pay rate or number of hours of individual employees. It was his understanding at the time that during FY18, some employees received pay increases in connection with reorganization of departments, promotions, or upgrading of positions. The changes were initiated prior to the current town manager's tenure here. And there was also a question about reversing those changes. And what we said is, while the Finance Committee's recommendations on salaries of employees inform the total appropriations for such purposes, the Finance Committee cannot unilaterally establish the salaries of individual employees, nor does the Finance Committee have any authority to set the hours of work. Instead, the town manager and or board of selectmen as appropriate have authority under the charter to set the hours and salaries for employees. So I would just point out that that's consistent with what I read.
All right, thank you, town council. Mr. Trumfield, did you have something to add regarding a legal issue?
No, I wanted to comment that we did get an opinion from KP Law on May 7, 2018, a 4-page letter from Attorney Joe Fair addressing these issues, which we put in the warrant for FY19. There were 15 positions back then that we did a grid for that was in the book, address these same issues. So we've been down this road already, and this is just a clarification. And in that letter, as was mentioned, the section...
Do you have that letter in front of you, sir?
Yeah, but I can't scan it to anybody. If anybody in the Finance Committee...
Ed, what's the date of the letter?
I have it.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Town council has it, so...
Okay, then That's all. I wanted to make her easier for her to find it by the date, but anyways, you're all set. Thank you.
Just 1 minute. Right, at this time, there's not anything else to add from town council's perspective. Mr. Zemanian's up next. Mr. Zemanian, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Zemanian, Precinct 1. This is a question in regards to something that a previous speaker said, that the vote from FinCom was not unanimous. Could we get what the accurate vote count was for this department?
Phil, could we get information on that vote from you?
I don't have that handy. It might be in the book, but I have to go find it. We put the votes for each department was recorded.
I believe it was 11-4. I may be wrong. But that's what I have listed on my budget.
Okay.
If Mr. Anzavino's out there, he keeps a pretty good record. Maybe he could opine on that.
Opine, thank you. Mr. John Anzavino, would you like to be opine on that for us, if you could?
Or perhaps, if he can't answer it, Mr. Enochian made the statement, so we could bring him back to get that
Hang on a
answer.
minute, Mr. Zemanian. Let me ask
Yep.
Mr. Anzavino. Thank you. John Anzavino, if we can bring in John Anzavino back in.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. John Anzavino, Finance Committee member, Precinct 4. If you look on page 7 in Article 16, you will see all the individual votes for each budget. And you will see that the information system was 11-4. But for anybody that's interested, on page 7, I don't know why it wasn't after the initial vote, but on page 7 is where you would find all the individual votes that we took.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Anzavino. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, you said Mr. Zemanian? All right, hang on. I gotta hear from town council for another point. Town council, good?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I did pull up the town personnel bylaws, and it says, the following procedures shall be used when hiring employees for filling regular full-time and regular part-time positions. This procedure may be used when hiring employees to fill casual, part-time, seasonal, or temporary positions. And it does have a description. And so I would suggest that at this point, if there's any inconsistency between the personnel bylaws and the charter is, it supersedes anything that would be inconsistent. And I don't see anything inconsistent with the town manager making a, intermittent part-time appointment under this or the charter as being problematic.
All right, thank you, Madam Town Council. Next up is Marty West.
Marty West, Precinct 6.
Mr. West, go ahead and identify yourself, precinct number, please.
Marty West, Precinct 6. I just checked in FinCom minutes from the April 1st, and the vote on this part of the budget was 11-4.
We understand that now.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
No, I just had my hand up while that conversation was going on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. West. Appreciate it. All right, I see no more hands up. Let's go into pro and con debate. Is there anybody with a question or a statement? So we can move on in this department. I'll give it about 10 more seconds, then we're gonna move on. Mr. Nunnally, go ahead, you can make a statement or.
It's a statement. I find it concerning. There are vague or no job descriptions when previously, the town is working on evaluations, and it gives the impression that this particular process shortcuts the hiring process. And although it's only $7,800, and I don't have a problem with the $7,800, but it gives me the impression that if you want to hire somebody and you don't want to go through a regular hiring process, then get them to volunteer. And then the following year, you put it in the budget, and there's really no advertising. There's no process for anyone else to even apply for the position, because the volunteer has a leg up. You know, so it's a statement, and it's just it feels like it shortcuts the process. It's only $7,800. I don't have a problem with that, but it could be a lot more.
Okay, you all set, Mr. Nunley?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We're gonna move on to John Rock. Mr. Rock has his hand up. Please bring him in. And John Rock, when you're brought in to the panel, please state your name and precinct number. Mr. Rock, go ahead.
He fell asleep.
Dr. Grimm, you have your hand up?
I just want to respond to Mr. Nunley, and I understand his concerns, and we are making active efforts in our hirings. I just want to be clear, we did not do this in any type of subversive way. The person who's in this job, actually, originally, we were paying to do this when she ran a private advertising newspaper. She retired out of that and then continued to volunteer to do it for months and months, and we decided it was a service that we needed and wanted. And that was why this one, as I said, was very unique. We are committed to advertising processes being fair and open. I just want to clarify, this was an extremely unique situation, and I do understand the concern, but there was no subversive effort here.
Right, thank you, Dr. Grimm. Okay, let me go back to the speakers. Mr. Bert Duran. Please bring in Bert Duran. We're still in we're in pro and con debate, so please state your name and precinct number, please, when you're brought in, Mr. Duran.
Bert Duran, Precinct 6?
Yes.
I counted 5 times that the town council said that what the town manager had done on this issue was permissible. I understand there might be concerns about process. This is a part-time position, a .2 position for $7,800. There is not a pattern of hiring in an underhanded way. There's been no other examples of any FTEs in the budget this year, last year, or any other time that there's been questions about the process. I don't have any problem with the town manager managing the town, given the authority that she's given by the town charter and all the bylaws. Town meeting doesn't exist to micromanage this process. I understand we have an important role, but we are spending an inordinate amount of time on a $7,800 position. The town council said 5 times was done in accordance with the authority that the town manager has. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Duran. Next up is Pat Colburn. Pat, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number. We are in the period of pro and con debate.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pat Colburn, Precinct 4. I am against this. It is the process. The process is everything. Someone could volunteer. We have fabulous volunteers, but someone can't volunteer for a position they don't know exists. So then it's filled without posting, so someone can't apply for a position they don't know exists. And I totally get this is $7,800. I get that, but I've been here long enough that we've seen positions come in and then they start out low and then it's increased. And next thing you know, it's a FTE that was never properly vetted and posted. So that's what my issue is. It's not $7,800. It's not a college student, losing a job. It is the process that we should be posting positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat Colburn. Next up is Elliot Hanson. Can we bring in Mr. Hanson? And Mr. Hanson, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number. We are still in the period of pro and con debate.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, sir. Please state your name and precinct number.
Elliot Hanson, Precinct 1. Time to move the question.
Okay, the question has been moved. That means cutting off debate. All right, at this point in time, we're gonna do a raise the hand function. We need to clear the hands. I'm sorry, I need a second. Can someone second that? I hear Cynthia Walsh seconding that from Precinct 2. All right, now we're gonna take a vote on cutting off debate. All right, I'm gonna ask, please clear the hands. Please don't put your hands up yet. Please clear the hands. All those in favor of cutting off debate, please raise your hand now. And will the town clerk take a count, please? Ten more seconds. Okay. Do we have a count, Steph?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody agrees? Okay, clear the hands, please. Clear the hands, okay. All those opposed, please raise your hand now. This is the cutoff debate. Ten seconds. Can I get a count, please? 12. Clear the hands. Clear the hand, please. Clear hands. Okay, all those abstain, please raise your hand. One. All right, motion to cut off debate passes. Stephanie, want to read the count?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vote is 120 yes, 12 noes, and 1 abstention.
Okay, so that department is now done.
That was to close.
Close debate.
No one made a motion.
No motions on the table. So that department is closed now. We're gonna move on. Next up, on the departments that were held was the department, someone put in Department 159, but I did not see a Department 159.
It's on page 40.
Is it page 40?
Page 40.
Page 40. Is that George Stalinski?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you, George, for your assistance.
Oh, no problem.
There you go, facilities. Page 40. All right, I have Joseph Scardino that held that department. Mr. Scardino, can we bring in Mr. Scardino? This is department number 159 on page 40, facilities. And this is the period of technical questions. Please only ask technical questions. No statements and no comments, please. And when Mr. Scardino is brought in, please state your name and precinct number. Do we bring in Mr. Scardino? Okay, standing by. He'll be brought in just a few seconds, I see, but Mr. Scardino's first. Okay, thank you.
Joe Scardino, Precinct 1. Mr. Moderator,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Scardino.
you to anyone that can answer the question. Electricity, gas, and water, respectively 402%, 465%, 507% increase. I know there's a footnote down below, but it's hard to figure out what the percentage increase is because the numbers really don't coincide with last year's budget because it wasn't presented this way. So can we get the percentage? Can we get the cost?
Do you want the, Joseph, so I can understand the question too that you're asking? You looking for percentages or the dollar cost?
The total dollar cost, because what's presented for FY 2021 are the unaggregated costs.
Dr. Grimm or anybody that can answer that from your team?
If Paul Jaffoon is on, he may have the number. I don't believe there were any increases. We level funded, I believe, on all of those. The increase that you see is because we consolidated them all into the facilities because they basically pretty much get paid out of that. But we level funded all of our utility line items.
But
go ahead, one more. You can ask one more question, Mr. Scardino.
Yeah, but under FY 2021, then those numbers are not the same ones to compare with the column percentage of change.
Well, we consolidated them all under facilities, added them all together, but there's no increase from what they were in 21. If you added all of 21's together, the percentage increase is the percentage increase in that particular department because that department grew by that much. We took the library bills, the water bills, the DPW building, the police building. You'll see zeros in those budgets, and we put them all into facilities because that's where it's paid out of. We monitor which buildings do what, but from budgetary standpoint, it's a lot cleaner to do it this way. And the increase, there is a level fund on the total cost of all of these.
So are you saying that if I went back to
through the moderator, please, through the moderator,
through the moderator to you to the manager, if I went to the fiscal year 2021 budget and went through all the departments, I would come up with 250,987 from fiscal year 2021.
If you added them all together, it should be a level fund, yes.
For electricity, that's what I was trying to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Are you okay, Mr. Scardino?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Scardino. Next up is, I have a point of order from Elliot Hanson. Can we bring in Mr. Hanson for a point of order? And Elliot, when you come in, please state your name, precinct number, and your point of order, please. We're just waiting for Elliot Hanson to be brought in.
I did hear some feedback. Oh.
Okay, Mr. Hanson, you're brought in. Just unmute yourself and start speaking, please. Name and precinct number. He's having problems, IT team, he's having problems unmuting himself. Elliot, you're able to speak. I'm going to move on, Elliot. We'll come back to you if you can start speaking. Next up is, I had Ellen Hahn. No? Okay. Next up is George Stalinski. Let's bring in George Stalinski, please. George, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number. This is on Department 159, page 40.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I apologize. I forgot to put my hand down from the previous question.
No problem, Mr. Delinsky. Okay, next up, Carrara. Scott, can you unmute yourself? Please state your name and precinct number, please. Just unmute yourself, Scott. That's the camera. There you go.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not, I don't mean to tease you. I'm just trying to help guide you.
It's all right. I got big shoulders.
No, it's okay. I apologize. Go ahead. I have Mrs. Carrara next to me. She's,
she laughing?
No, I'm not saying anything. I'll stay out of that. Go ahead, Scott.
The question I have is, the skilled craftsman's going up 1.36%. And Thea has just accepted this position into their union. They got 2.5, 2.5, and I think either 1.5 or 1.75. But the question I'd like to know, are we gonna get 1.36 and then 2.50
No, it's
on top of that?
through the moderator.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's likely, I believe he had already gotten a 2.5 and a 2.5. He was one of those employees that was still within the 10 steps. So some employees in Thea who had been getting the 2.5s, if they were still on that original grid, they still got their raises. And so did non-unions at that point. We stopped it for non-unions. He actually probably had received it because I think he was getting paid as if he was, no, he wasn't in Thea, so he wasn't eligible for those raises. That 1.36 reflects the 1.25 raise in the Thea contract plus 0.1 pay period because it's 26.1 pay periods in the year. The way the calendar works, last year was 26.2. So you have to account for that in the budgeting. But because he wasn't in the union prior, he's eligible for the union raise this year, which was a 1.25 plus the fact that it's a 26.1 pay period. That's the 1.36. So his number is accurate.
All right. Well, I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't have a chance to get it straight before this. And then I know we voted that contract, so
yes.
I just...
Scott, did you have another question?
No, that's it, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrara. Next up is Margaret Seawick. Please bring in Margaret Seawick. When you brought in Margaret, please state your name and precinct number.
Margaret Seawick, precinct 6. Money was allocated for the Historical Society to look into possibly doing some kind of a accessibility for handicap. I know money was allocated. Was anything done?
And we're in the facilities department here.
Yes, is that it?
In what building?
The Historical Society building.
Dr. Grimm?
So this was something I had requested last year. Paul Jaffoon had gone to CPC to request, and it was not approved by CPC. We're still hopeful that down the road we can look at a better plan and work side by side with CPC to have that building, that Lucius Clapp building, made handicapped accessible. It is still something I would like to look to do, but it did not get approved last year by CPC.
Why was that? Why didn't it get approved?
I can't speak for CPC. We asked and we did not receive it. But I do plan on going back again. Maybe if I can present a better plan for usage, maybe they'll feel a little better about it, but I'm hopeful we can. It's a lovely building and it's a shame that we can't use it really.
Okay.
For anybody with accessibility issues. We did do a study. There are some options. And I believe it was relatively expensive. In fact, I'm just getting a text from Mr. Jaffoon now. There were a few options.
Dr. Grimm, hang on a minute. You asked and answered. The question was asked, you answered it. I'd just like to move on. Peggy, I think you asked your 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Next up is Candace Fisher. Candace, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number. And we're in the technical questions, non-debatable, and we're in Department 159, Facilities, on page 40.
Sorry, my hand should not be raised. Sorry, apologies.
That's okay, Candace, no problem. We're going to move on then.
Yep.
Next up is Mr. Steve Hahn. please bring in Steve Hahn. And Steve, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my hand is up by accident.
That's okay, Mr. Hahn, no problem at all. All right, I had a point of order, a written point of order from Elliot Hanson, since he could not unmute himself. He says we never took the vote on Department 155, which was IT. The way it's working is, once we do technical, non-debatable questions, we go in pro and con debate. If you want to make a motion, that's where you make the motion, but no motion was made on Department 155. So we just move on. That department is now closed. Just want to be clear, it's up to the town meeting reps to make a motion under the pro and con debate section. All right, we're in technical, non-debatable questions on Department 159 facilities. I see one more hand, Lou Gito. Can we bring in Mr. Lou Gito? Mr. Gito, Lou, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number.
Lou Gito, Precinct 4. If the town wants to make the library handicapped accessible, why don't they put in an article for town meeting to do that? That's a question.
Well,
Historical Society.
well, we're in facilities. Dr. Graham, I don't know if you can answer
But
that.
that was the question under.
Sure. So to Mr. Gito's point, we could, but typically, even if we did, we would seek CPC money for that because it's directly historic and appropriate, and we would still have wanted CPC support, but we certainly could put in an article, but at this point, we've been trying to be very limited on our direct borrowing for debt reasons and not to increase our debt service extensively, but we could put it in as a separate article, yes, but I still likely would probably want to put it in as an article with something that we might fund through CPC.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Gito? Do you have one more?
It does answer my question, but it doesn't answer the issue. If there is a dispute between the CPC and the town wants to do it, then they have the opportunity to do it.
Okay, well, if there's a question there, I'll take the question, but no more comments, please. Do you have one more question?
I guess the question is, how do you resolve that issue if that's what you want to do?
I guess the answer is I probably will still go back to CPC. As I said, Paula had a few studies done and maybe we can get a more favorable response if we go with a couple of options. But in the end, if we can't, we have to make a decision on, the board, and based on any recommendations we also make for articles, would ultimately have to make a decision on whether or not it wants to ask for borrowing for that. It was about $700,000, if I recall.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gito. We're gonna move on. Next up is John Lenahan. Can we bring in John Lenahan? John, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, John. Go right ahead. Name and precinct number, please.
John Lenahan, Precinct 1. And if it's appropriate, I think that was rejected by CPC. You have other members around you, but I think because it's not actually historic preservation and that's—
Okay, you're a member of CPC, so that's your answer to that? Okay, thank you, sir. Did you have another question?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lenahan. Next up is Janice Limwell. Can we bring in Janice Limwell? Janice, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number. And we're on Department 159, Facilities, Technical, Non-Debatable Questions.
Yes, I was just going to say what John Lenahan just said about the handicap accessibility to the building. But if she checks it out, maybe she could send it, reissue it to the CPC. Sorry, I've been an echo. Can you understand me?
Yes, yes. Right. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Dr. Grimm understands that. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. All right. Next, feedback. Let me reduce my microphone. Mark Zemanian is up next. Mark, please state your name and precinct number.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Semanian, Precinct 1. I can confirm what Mr. Linehan and Ms. Lindwall said, that this was rejected by the CPC due to the fact that it was considered maintenance and not historical preservation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you all from the 3 members of the CPC that made their statements. Thank you. All right. I don't see anybody else up for technical questions. Oh, John Rock? John Rock, are you? Oh, you're on the phone? Please unmute your phone, John. State your name and precinct number.
Hello?
This is on article, department number 159, facilities. We're in technical, non-debatable questions.
Yeah, hi, this is John Rock, Precinct 3. I have nothing to say on this. I had wanted to speak on the previous department.
Okay.
So
Department
this is a little late.
Okay, sorry, John. We try to get you into the panel. It just didn't work.
Yeah, I'm on by phone, so
okay,
I have to be unmuted by phone. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're gonna move on. Okay, I think we're done here. I see no one else for technical, non-debatable questions. We're gonna move on to pro and con debate. Are there any hands raised? Janice Linwall? This Janice Linwall? Okay, she took it down. All right. No, she's talking. Janice, you're signaling the feedback is technically interfering with your speech there. You can one more time. We're having technical issues with Janice's microphone. Okay, we'll move on. All right, we're in pro and con debate. Seeing none. All right. A town meeting rep said to panelists, if you're having problems with your microphone, you can type in your question. That's okay, you can type it in, and one of the people here will take the question and bring it over to me. I'll give you 10 more seconds. I'd just like to move on. I don't see any hands raised. All right, that's for department number 159 is now closed. We're gonna move on. Next up is department number 210, police, on page 27. We have David Billow. Can we bring in David Billow, who put the hold on that department? That's department 210, page 27, police department. Billow. We're bringing in David Billow, B-I-L-L-O. Okay. David, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please. Again, we're in the period of technical, non-debatable questions, so I'm expecting a question. We're just waiting for Mr. David Billow to be brought in. Stand by, please. Yes, bring him in, please.
Hi, David Billow, Precinct 4. And I have a question on the ammunition line item in the police budget. I see that it was proposed and funded at $55,000. And I was wondering how many rounds that represents and why ammunition is being purchased at that level. Thank you.
Okay, whoever can answer.
I
Graham?
I believe the police chief is on.
Chief McNamara, would you be able to answer the question, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Chief. Go
So
ahead.
the cost of ammunition is increased significantly over the last year. Since the pandemic, it is very difficult to get ammunition rounds, and the cost has increased. The ammunition budget line is also purchases taser equipment as well within that line item. So it's not just rounds that we purchase for our firearm, it's also taser and cartridges and training. So we train on both of those, and as well as other equipment that we have to purchase for our duty belts. That comes out of the ammunition line.
Thank you, Chief McNamara. Mr. Bill, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You have another question?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, next up is Bob Cohn. Can we bring in Robert Cohn? Mr. Cohn, when you brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Bob Cohn, Precinct 5.
Go ahead,
Just a
sir.
point of information, I put a hold on the regional school and we went by it. Are we planning to come back to that? That's all
I did not see the hold on that, sir.
Well, I did. We talked about it yesterday too.
What department number was that?
Hold on. I had Public Works too. We talked about that too. Hold on, please. Account number nothing. It just says educational 301, excuse me, 301.
Did you put that department number in the screen on Wednesday?
No, I did not. I didn't do all of them. I told you I didn't do it.
Right, so
my
that's
fault.
why I'm saying we're not gonna open that up. 301.
Well, why did you call me yesterday and go over this with me?
Well, I just want to confirm the ones you did put in.
Well, that was one of them too. I had Public Works in there too.
What number
We
is
went over
that?
that extensively too.
What number is that, Robert?
There was 5 of them in there. There was snow removal. There was rubbish.
Okay.
We went all over this yesterday.
All right, we'll go down the list. Now we're on Department of Police.
Well, I think it's a shame that when you have questions and you call and we just went right by it, I think that's not right either.
Well,
I'm sorry.
understandable.
My rights as a town meeting member, especially going over this, I made a mistake. You were nice enough to call me. We went over this, and now the time comes and we skip all of it. In those budgets, there's some
Sir, I
serious,
informed you
serious
that you didn't follow the instructions, and I just asked you to follow instructions Wednesday night. So let's move on. Do you have any questions on the police department? All right, we're gonna move on. Anybody else on the police department? Pat Colburn, please. When Pat's brought in, Ms. Colburn's brought in, please state your name and precinct number, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pat Colburn, Precinct 4. I have 2 questions. I'm going to ask the first one first so I don't get confused. Are there any partially funded positions or grant-funded positions in this budget that will need additional town funding next year? To the town manager, please.
Dr. Grimm, could you answer that?
I don't believe I have anything, like the safer grants with fire have already been absorbed. And I don't think we have any half police officers budgeted this year, though I would defer to the police chief. Anything grant funded, for instance, we had one where the grant is running out. We've notified the person the position will not continue, but I have nothing that's going to automatically roll over into a budgeted position.
Okay.
Thank you. My second question is about the CARES Act money. I pulled the sheet off the virtual table, and the vast majority of that went to the police department. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand this chart. For example, the wages for patrol officers is through December 30th, which I assume is of 2021.
No, it was through 20, and then it was reopened for January through April 30th of this year, and then that's the end of it.
So nothing is going to be covered by the CARES Act after April 30th of this year?
No, I wouldn't say nothing, but what you see currently is what's been encumbered. A lot is going to happen with the American Rescue Act. There's still money coming in. So just to give a little background, when we had that CARES money, we asked every department to put in requests for what they wanted and needed. 1.5 of the 2.5 went over to the schools. You have their breakdown. We use some of it for our police decontamination funding, if you will, because of the nature of the police officers' work. We had a lot of PPE. We had fire and facilities asked for PPE. We also had a lot covered separately by FEMA. So no department was denied or not given what they needed, but currently what we'll be looking at is the next round of funding coming in and how that will be used. And that American Rescue money that's coming in is what we're talking about using for refunding the stabilization that we use to offset some of our costs, as well as possibly more PPE equipment, the personal protective equipment, and we could also use it on some infrastructure projects.
Mr. Moderator, if I could just follow up. So what you're basically saying is we will not need, I'm sorry, we will not need any additional town funding to cover COVID related. It should be coming from the American Resources Act. Is that what you're saying?
I'm hopeful. I mean, I can't ever say never. I mean, we don't know what will happen tomorrow if the pandemic breaks out again and what the funding may be from the federal government. But as it stands right now, we have enough from federal funding that is covering our costs as best. We have not had to deny anything to a department or use town funding that did not come out of CARES or FEMA at this point. I really, it's too much of a catch-all to sort of look into the future. If we have another massive outbreak and the federal government doesn't continue to fund, let's say, I can't promise that. But as it stands right now, I don't envision, we're budgeted fine to operate outside of COVID, let's say.
Thank you. And the last follow-up is, what was the stabilization fund you just referred to? I think you said that you used stabilization money until you got...
Yep. So the FinCom, for this current budget that we're in, I had indicated that I had held money back. You know, we hadn't hired, we hadn't spent, and I had money basically in the budget to offset some of the revenue losses we knew were coming. When those revenue losses hit from state receipts that we knew were going to be lower, I said to FinCom, look, I've got enough money out of my turnback money that I'll have at the end of June of this year to fund that. But FinCom instead decided just to bridge it with stabilization money. We are working with CARE, with our American Rescue. Sue Herman is looking to see if that money that we use to bridge that gap for the loss of revenues can be actually used to refund that stabilization that we used to bridge the revenue loss. That wasn't used per se to buy anything for COVID. It was used to offset revenue losses.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Moving on, next up is Joseph Scardino. Can we bring in Mr. Scardino? And once you're in, Joseph, please state your name and precinct number.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Joe Scardino, Precinct 1.
Go ahead.
As a follow-up to the last speaker, my question is, I believe that the answer to one of her questions was that there was no expenditures after April 30th. Is that my correct understanding? Through you to answer.
No, I didn't say there were no expenditures. It's specifically regarding the police number that went through December 30th of 2020. That police patrol line item for using CARES money to offset some officer expenses, officer-related expenses, was extended to April 30th. That's just specifically related to that one item. I don't know. Currently, there are still COVID expenses that we are incurring, and they're still falling under CARES, and we still have departments that can request money under CARES.
Okay, so I'm seeking a clarification. And by the way, thank you for putting that exhibit up on the virtual table. At the top of that exhibit, Mr. Moderator, expenditures March 1, 2020 through December 31st, 2021, and then extended December 27, 2020 to December 31st of 2021. So I'm reconciling that with the so-called December 30th with no year with respect to the 3 police items.
Is there a question?
Through you to anybody that can answer why those 2 dates are different?
Right, because we could only go through December 30th. Well, first was part of a contract negotiation, and we agreed to do through December 30th and then see where we stood with the pandemic and the vaccines. Then we went back to the table with patrol and we said we had agreed we would discuss it and see where the vaccine status was, and we agreed to extend that to April 30th. And then by that point, we felt that those who wanted vaccines and their families had enough time to have vaccines, and that's why we ended that. That's just that specific use of that money. That has nothing to do generally with how CARES can be expended townwide. It was just for that specific thing as part of a contract term.
Then can you explain the two statements at the top of the exhibit?
Which two? Hold on. I'm trying to
This
pull
will
this
have to
up.
be the last question, Mr. Scardino.
Well, this is all from the same question, Mr. Moderator.
Right,
No,
right.
but-
Well, because the federal government extended to 12/31/21 for everything. So the federal government added time on this.
I see. So that was confusing the way it was presented.
Yeah. One
And-
was a contractual issue and one is the federal government time frame. And one was just how long we agreed to give something was to April 30th in that particular item, because that was a contractual negotiation.
Thank you. One just final note. I footed the town side column. I get 631,007. You've got 562,421. Can anybody explain the difference, those two numbers? I believe they're meant to be added up with a total line there.
I've got Susan on the text. I can see if Ms. Herman has an answer to that. It could have to do with encumbrances.
Can we get an answer to?
I'm working. I don't know if Ms. Herman is Ms. Herman available right there?
Is Sue Herman on the panel?
Yeah, so the question was, again, just Mr. Scardino, the question was that your
Correct.
addition didn't come up the same as what the 500,000 number appeared?
Yes. So I'm wondering whether one of those was either excluded, included, or whether the total is wrong. I'm just trying to reconcile that. I get 631,007 when I add up those six numbers.
Mhm.
She gets 562,421, and I'm trying to reconcile the difference.
I believe that some of that is money that had been expended, where you're looking, what her total numbers were what is encumbered. Some is encumbered that has not been spent.
No, the total there is expensed, encumbered, and estimated for.
Okay, let me look at that.
The
Hold on.
grand total, the way I read it, Ms. Manager.
Okay, so I've got Sue on the other end.
Mr. Scardino, this has to be the last question.
It is, Mr. Moderator.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for an answer from Susan.
all right.
Mr. Moderator, do you want to go on to the next speaker while I'm waiting for the answer?
Okay, I have a point of information from Dr. Glenn Tucker. Can we bring in Dr. Tucker? And Dr. Tucker, when you're brought in, please state your name and your point of information, please. Thank you. I'm just waiting for Dr. Glenn Tucker to be brought in to the panel.
I'll pass, Mr. Moderator. You can see the my comment and follow-up question.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tucker. Graham, do you have your answer yet?
No, I'm waiting for Ms. Herman. She may pop on and speak.
All right, I want to keep moving on here.
Yeah, I'll get you an answer. It just may not happen in 2 minutes here, but we're trying to get an answer.
All right. I'm going to move on. Eric Anderson, please bring in Eric Anderson. And Mr. Eric Anderson, when you brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Eric Anderson, Precinct 2. I just had a brief question through you to either the town manager or the police chief. I was curious about the feeding prisoners line item and the reason for the decrease, if we're like switching to store brand or just anticipate jailing fewer people or other reasons. Thank you.
I'll defer to the police chief.
Chief McNamara, could you answer his question, please?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, go ahead, Chief.
For you, we have held less people in custody during the pandemic when possible, and that's the reduction.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. All right, thank you. Next up is Sylvia Whiting. Please bring in Sylvia Whiting.
Hello, this is Sylvia Whiting, Precinct 6.
Yes, go ahead, Sylvia.
I had a question about the education and training budget that's listed there. It's listed originally at 365,000. It went up 9% to about 431,000. And I just wondered, is there anything, how is that money used by the department? And is there any training around diversity, anti-racism issues, or implicit bias as required for the police department? Or is this all elective training that officers, that the police choose themselves as to what they're going to do?
Okay, Dr. Grimm or Chief McNamara, whoever would like to answer that?
Certainly can answer that.
Mr. Moderator, is that the line item, the education incentive pay?
Yes.
Which line item you should be referring to?
Yes.
Education and training.
Education incentive pay?
Yes, I don't see any education and training. I see education incentive pay.
So
Yes.
that is a pay for their education for the degrees.
That's, oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question. I thought it was the training. No, that's a contractual, that's pay based on whether they have a master's, a bachelor's. That's a contractual line item.
Okay, where is the training? Where is the actual training? I see $100 for in-service training and education. I don't see anything else on here.
Through you, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, go ahead, Chief McNamara.
That would be the overtime in-service training line item, just after court time, if she's looking in the book. And the education, in-service training, some of it's required by the MPTC, Municipal Police Training Council. And then additionally, we send people to some of the courses that you had mentioned, previous speaker had mentioned.
Is that all elective or are those required?
Some of MPTC, which is the Mass Municipal Training Council, they require classes each year in service. That is a requirement. And that is 32 hours of in-service training. We additionally do our own in-house training as well. And then we send officers to outside training additionally.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much, Sylvia Whiting. All right, I don't see any more hands up for the technical non-debatable questions. Let's move into pro and con debate. Are there any hands up? Give it 10 more seconds. I see no hands. All right, Mr. Nunnally, can we bring in Mr. Reginald Nunnally, please?
Yes, Reginald Nunnally, Precinct 1.
Yes, go ahead.
The town has done a great job in terms of hiring the chief of police, which is a female, and the town manager is a female. How does that trickle down in terms of diversification for the rest of the department? as well as the town? Do we have numbers of how many women, how many people of color, how many veterans, et cetera, hold these positions within the department?
Whoever can answer that, Dr. Grimm or Chief McNamara?
Chief can answer for her department.
Go ahead,
Absolutely.
Chief McNamara.
So with regards to patrol officers and spare officers, we have one person of color in the rank of sergeant. We have a number of female officers. We're higher than the state average and the national average for female police officers. As far as diversity, we hire through the civil service, and we get a list of candidates through civil service. That's how we hire.
So does the department have any particular goals that they're trying to achieve?
Chief McNamara?
Through hiring, sir?
Yes.
So when we request to hire, we would love to increase our diversity with different races. It is difficult with the candidates that we get from civil service.
If I might follow up to Mr. Nunnally's question, the town is part of the REMAP grant, as you know, and we have the police department represented on our REMAP group. And a lot of what REMAP is dealing with is how do we diversify in hiring? The problem is for police and fire, when we are in civil service, we request a list of candidates and we get them from them. So we don't have, let's say, the control, if you will, over what the diverse nature of those candidates are that come to us. In other departments, we can talk, and we're actively talking about recruiting and how we can recruit better and where we may work to get local colleges to recruit better, internship programs, and all of those things to expand on our diversity hiring.
Is that the same for the school department?
I can't speak. I believe Dr. Marcus is on.
This is Dr. Marcus, and we've made diversity an incredibly important part of what we do every day, and that includes the staff that we have. So it's a great question, and it's something that's very important to the school department.
Are there any numbers that you can report, Doctor, at this point? You may not.
I'm not sure what you mean by the numbers, the specific. We've as I said, we've made it a real priority, and it's something that we've made some great progress on this year, certainly, in terms of looking at diversity in a broad way and hiring folks who come to us from all different kinds of backgrounds. So we've made some great progress. I can get you numbers if you're interested in that specific.
Yes, I am, and that would be great if you could. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mr. Nunnally. Thank you, Dr. Marcus, Chief McNamara, and Dr. Grimm. Well, I'd like to move on, Dr. Grimm. I have an answer. I have an answer for Mr. Scardino's question, though. Okay, go ahead. If it's short. It is 631,007. He is correct. That should be the number. Thank you, Dr. Grimm. Next up is Cynthia Walsh. Ms. Walsh, when you're brought in, please state, actually, you are a member of the panel. Please state your name and precinct number. She's having problems unmuting herself, I believe. Stand by for a moment.
I think I finally got it.
Hi, Cynthia.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. Are we in pro and con right now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to a previous speaker because I don't think you got the full answer. And obviously, as the community knows, I have a bias. Two of my siblings were Stoughton police officers, both of whom are retired. One was a woman, one was a veteran. There are a number of veterans on our department.
Miss Walsh, hang on, you're out of order. I have to, don't look at me that way, please. I'm gonna have to rule you out of order. Thank you very much for your comment. If you have a question, if you want to ask, well, we're in pro-con debate. I'll let you make your statement. I apologize. Go ahead. I'll let you continue.
I don't have to come out of this little room
No,
and
no,
hurt
don't
you.
come out, please.
And then we'd have to call the police.
Okay,
There are several veterans currently on the force, some of whom are female. And as for diversity, I don't think we should always consider that a black and white issue. We do have at least one officer who is of Asian ancestry. Also, because we live in a language diverse community, we've made a real effort to hire officers who can communicate with our population in their native tongue. And I think we've done a very good job. I know that members of the Brazilian and Portuguese Azoran community have been able to communicate with our officers very successfully. So when we think of diversity, we shouldn't just think of black and white. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Walsh. All right, let's move on. Sylvia Whiting's up next. Can we bring in Sylvia Whiting, please? When you come in, Sylvia, can you please state your name and precinct number?
Sylvia Whiting, Precinct 6. I just wanted to ask, are there any other options besides going through the civil service list to recruit? And I believe that we should consider black and white when we're considering officers, that it is a vital issue for the town, especially one as diverse as Stoughton.
We do not have the option not to go. We are a civil service community that actually would have to be negotiated, and towns that have gone out of it, there's been a high negotiation cost for that. It is not a simple process, and some towns just cannot get out of it. The labor force will not leave civil service.
Okay, you all set, Sylvia? All right, you see Roberts' hands raised. Roberts, can we bring in, actually, she's a member of the panel. Ms. Roberts, can you state your name and precinct number, please? You are muted right now. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mr. Miller. My name is Deborah Roberts. I'm on the select board, and I'm also from Precinct 6. To the previous speaker and to Dr. Grimm, she made reference to REMAP. That refers to the Racial Equity Municipal Action Plan that we're working on. We're developing a process so we can recruit and retain people of color. And when we talk about the diversity, yes, it is a black and white issue, but it is also diversity of all, and that means age. So when we think about those police officers that are retiring because they have reached a certain age, we should also think about a well-versed or mixture of age groups within that police department. So thank you very much for that comment.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. And I think that's it. All right, there was a point of information from Paul. All right, Lauren Mahan. Okay, before we get to her, can we bring in Lauren Mahan? But let me just point of information from Paul Demuse. He's asking, should the moderator be asking if there are any motions to be made on department once the pro and con debate ends? That's just part of the whole process that we always follow, pro and con, and then be motions made. So I'm not going to ask that. It's up to the town meeting reps, the wisdom of the town meeting reps. If they want to make a motion at the end of the pro and con debate, they may do so. If there's a second, we go forward with those motions. All right, at this point, I'm going to hear from Lauren Mahan, please.
I was just going to move the question.
Thank you. Has been moved. That means debate. I need a second. Seconded by Maximilian. So this cuts off debate for the police department, 210 if it passes. All right, we're going to do a show of hands. All those in favor of cutting off debate, please raise your hand now. And will the town clerk take the count, please? Ten seconds. good, Steph? You good? Okay, clear the hands, please. Clear the hands. Clear the hands. Clear the hands. All right, all those opposed, please raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand, please. You see anybody, Stephanie? Okay. Clear the hands, please. Clear the hands. I still see a hand raised. Okay, sorry, IT department's pushing back a little bit on me. All right, takes a second, they said. All right, and all those abstain? We get the yes, no's, and abstentions. Okay, can I have the town clerk report the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To cut off debate, the vote is yes, 128, no, 2, abstentions, 2.
All right, thank you, town clerk, Mrs. Carrara. All right, so that completes department. We were on Department 210. There were no motions on Department 210, so we're going to move on. That's closest to police department. Next up is Department 220. That's fire and rescue, and that appears on page 31 of your warrant books. Page 31. The fire department. That's 220. Page 31. And person who held this department was John Anzavino. Could we bring in Mr. Anzavino? And John, when you're brought in, can you please state your name and precinct number, please?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much. John Anzavino, Precinct 4.
Yes, go ahead, John.
My question is, earlier in the budget, it was mentioned that there was only the one new position in the budget, and that was the one that we spent a long time on earlier. And I just wanted to point out that, in fact, there is a new position here, the assistant chief, and that's a new position in this year's budget. I believe, and Dr. Grimm can correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe that was a contractual thing that they started this assistant chief, but I just wanted to ask if is that the case, that this is another new position in the budget? Because it was stated earlier that the other position, I believe, was the only one.
Dr. Grimm?
Yeah, Mr. Anzavino's right. When I was asked about new positions, I said I had restructured one, which was the facilities, over to the associate superintendent. And then we had that part-time communications position, but he is right. And I think that it probably didn't dawn on me because it was voted in as part of the fire budget last year. It's just that it got put into the budget this year, but Mr. Anzavino is right. But it was hired in this current year's budget based on the contract and put into next year's budget. But again, that was contractually voted by town meeting. But Mr. Anzavino is right. That is technically a new position in the budget this year.
Okay, one more question, Mr. Anzavino, if you have one.
That was it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Dr.
Mr. Anzavino. Rick Coleman, can we bring in Mr. Coleman?
The unmute didn't show up very quickly. Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. Were there any positions reduced because of this additional position?
Yeah, so part of the agreement in the contract was that one firefighter position would be converted to an assistant fire chief. So there technically was no gain in numbers of employees. It was a retitling, but it technically is a new title. But yes, and again, the fire union agreed to that. That was a position we tended to never be able to fill again because we just couldn't get enough names from civil service and get people into the academy.
Thank you. All set.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coleman. I did see Antonio Souza's hand. Did he put it down? I think he put it down. Okay, we're still in the technical, non-debatable section here. I don't see any other, oh, I do see, well, Reginald Nunley. Well, let me first go to Antonio Souza. He put his hand back up. Can we bring in Mr. Souza?
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
to the
Name and
town, to the town manager. So what,
Tony, name and precinct number, please.
I'm sorry, Antonio Souza, precinct
Go ahead.
Deputy Chief.
I don't think we heard your question. Can you restate that, Tony? We're not hearing your question, Tony.
Am I on mute? Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Start speaking right now. Go ahead. You're on
Yeah,
mute.
my question is, why do we need an assistant chief and a deputy chief?
All right, Dr. Brem, or whoever can answer that.
I'll defer to Chief Larissy to explain it in depth, but again, this was voted on as a contractual agreement back a year ago. Actually, the agreement to put this position in was 3 years ago before I even came here. It's just that it's finally been funded, but this was actually voted in a fire contract about 3 years ago. I'll defer to Chief Larissy on the specific differences in the position.
All right,
I will
let's hear
point out
from,
that- yeah,
let's hear from the
Deputy-
chief then.
Okay.
Let's hear from Chief Larissy. Thank you. Is he on the panel somewhere?
Yes, I am. Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, Chief.
Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. Souza. First, I do want to agree that, a new position was not created. It was, a new title was. And that position of assistant chief was fully funded within our budget, with the cost of a few line items that made that up. What I've been asking for, well, first of all, the deputy chief is a union position. The assistant chief is a management position. Since I've been here, we've been trying to work to get this new position the last 5 years. And 2 years ago, the union agreed to it, but through contract negotiations, did not agree to give up that deputy chief's position in the union. So what we're looking to do, and I've always wanted to do it, a big part of our job is EMS. We go through state inspections. We're heavily regulated by the state. We're heavily regulated by the hospital where we get our medical control out of. The majority of, I'm not gonna say the budget, but a big part of our budget is EMS. And what I've been looking to do, and I haven't been able to do it, is make that EMS, that deputy chief's position, an EMS deputy, overseeing all of EMS and reporting to the assistant chief and myself. And that's the goal we're trying to get to. Back in 2000, in the early 2000s, this department did have 2 deputy chiefs. One was eliminated through attrition. It's a position that they've had. It was a position that I believe, back when the town had a review board come in after the death of firefighter Melende, and I hate keep bringing that up because it's not fair to him or his family. A lot of things came out of that in the needs of the fire department, the staffing. And that's why they created 2 deputy chiefs positions. And over the years, those were eliminated. So this does not increase staffing. We are still at 65. This changes, creates a new title, and that new title is funded entirely within the budget. We're gonna reorganize, and my goal is to make that deputy chief's position deputy of EMS operations.
All right, thank you, Chief. Mr. Souza, you got one more question?
No, that'll explain, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Next up is Reginald Nunley. Mr. Nunley, let's bring in Mr. Nunley. When you're brought in, just name and precinct number, please.
Reggie Nunley, Precinct 1.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Fire department is a really important department within in town. In town, are we losing a firefighter in creating this position, or should we be adding this position and maintaining the level of firefighters that we had for fiscal year 2021?
the agreement was that we reduced one position in the budget, and typically that position has been going unfilled because we just couldn't get enough seats in an academy. We have retirements. There tended to always be at least one position vacant. Our manning numbers, our staffing numbers for how many firefighters on shift have not changed, so we are as fully covered as we ever were, and we're not incurring extra overtime because that it was a position that never was able to be filled typically anyway. We always had a vacant, 1 to 2 vacant positions.
Thank you.
Are you all set, Mr. Nunnally?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next up is George Stalinski. Can we bring in, George, you're actually a member of the panel. George, state your name and precinct number, please.
George Stalinski, Precinct 2. Just a couple of quick questions on the staffing. I noticed the deputy fire chief, that union position, has a 13.74% increase in salary. Why is that such a large jump?
Dr. Graham or Chief Larissy?
Moderator, through you, that jump, that is probably the biggest jump we've had in salaries, and that was a result of the last bargaining contract. That was, what accounted for that is the removal of one step. We used to have 2 steps for the deputy's position. We went to the 1. And also in this last contract, we had a lot of roll-ins into the salary. So as you see in the budget, there'll be a lot of line items like longevity, that were rolled into the salaries. So that is the one-time thing, George. It is the one that sticks out compared to all others, and that was the result of the collective bargaining agreement.
All right. The second part of the question was on your program administrator 1 position that took a almost a 24% decrease in salary. What is that?
Okay, so that also is, recently we had Secretary Kathy McGrady retire back in, I think, November. She was with the department for 24 years. I think she worked through 7 fire chiefs, a couple actings. So Kathy, obviously being that's your longevity there. She was there for 24 years. She was at the top of her pay scale, and the position, the hiree that they brought in was brought in at a lower step.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you, Chief. Next up is Barbara Anzavino. Can we bring in Barbara Anzavino? And Barbara, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
Hi, close yours. Hold on a second. You got it?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Barbara Anzavino, Precinct 4. Chief, I have a question for you. A while ago, we had to add a second ambulance because I want to know if we're running that second ambulance all the time. That's the first question. And second, are we reaching the capacity of that ambulance? Do you feel like we're going to maybe in the near future reach 3? I know you can't count last year because of the pandemic, so it would be pre-pandemic numbers. Are you comfortable with 2? Are we getting close to 3? Just curious.
For you, Mr. Moderator, Mrs. Anzavino, that's a great question. I love to talk about it because we're proud of the fact that we finally have 2 ambulances running 24/7 within the town. That was not the case when I came in 2016. I don't know why I'm getting background, but I was a little too close. The 2016, because of our staffing was at a certain level for minimum man, and we were only able to, well, let's put it this way, and I've given this presentation before, we relied on 440 mutual aid requests for our ambulance to cover our town back in 16 and 17. And by going up to 11-man minimum, which we did within the budget, even though contractual was 9, I was able to staff to 11. And part of that too was the safer personnel that this board, I mean, this assembly, the town meeting voted for to bring on 8 additional people. We've been running 2 ambulances. There's on occasion that we're even getting a 3rd ambulance out. So all volume, we have the 3rd ambulance. We are using it, not as much. So I don't know if that, Barbara, if that answers your question. when we first started back in 2016, our ambulance revenue brought in $1,026,000 by staffing a second ambulance, and it's been consistent at about $1.6 million in revenue that has come into the town, for use is obviously within everyone's budget. And that's been consistent, even though we had a slow start with COVID. We are just swamped. It just picked up, and we are probably on track I'm hoping to meet that even through a pandemic at 1.6 million. It'll probably be 1.5, a little bit over that this year.
Okay, thank you. I was just more concerned, like in the near future, how close we were to needing that third one. Should we start planning? That's all I was wondering. Thank you.
Yep. So to answer that question, we're not close. We're not at that point yet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I was muted. More hands raised for the technical non-debatable questions. So let's go into the period of pro and con debate. Any town meeting reps have any pro and con debate statements they'd like to make? Please raise your hands now, otherwise we're going to move on. Ten more seconds. All right, seeing none, debate now ends since there are no more speakers.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator.
Peggy Seawick, you just made it. Peggy Seawick. Go ahead, bring in Margaret Seawick. Did I pronounce that name right? Seawick. Margaret Seawick. Let's give her a couple more seconds. Looks like she might have put her hand down. Okay, she put her hand down.
It was a mistake, John. Mistake.
That's okay, Peggy, no problem at all. So that ends our debate in the fire department, Department 220, page 31. There are no more speakers.
Could I just thank the fire chief? He's outgoing the end of June, and I just can't let that go without thanking him for his tremendous service. All
right, Chief Larissy, you got a quick couple comments?
I do, Mr. Moderator. I don't know if it's the time, but I want to take it. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the men and women of the Stoughton Fire Department for the tremendous job they have done and continue to do during the pandemic. I want to thank their families as well, because of the stress that's put on their families, their members coming home, not knowing whether they're exposed or not, added a great deal of stress to families, and I want to thank their families as well. I also want to, when you hear the word essential workers, these individuals rise to the top, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the pandemic. No one was at greater risk than our firefighters, transporting COVID-19 individuals in the confinement of an ambulance. They stepped up when many others stepped back. I also want to thank my day staff for assisting me in applying for being awarded and managing the town's $2.5 million CARES Act funding, which we worked with the schools on as well. This staff also secured $50,000 in PPE funding for police and fire, and we secured another $77,000 for EMS. So this was all during the pandemic, managing the pandemic. So I just want to give a shout out. They've done a tremendous job. They continue to. I thank Janice Bruce and her staff for all her support. I thank Donna McNamara and her staff for all their support. Because those were.
Can we wrap it up, Chief?
Yep, those were very stressful days at the beginning of this COVID, especially not having the PPE that we needed at a time that we needed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. So noted. All right, that ends it for the fire department. Now that department is now closed. Let's move on to Department 411, Development Services, page 36, 411. Department 411, Development Services, page 36 in the warrant books. And the person at the town meeting rep that held that department was Robert Cohn. Can we bring in Robert Cohn? We're in the period of technical questions, non-debatable questions. So when Mr. Cohn is brought in, please state your name and precinct number, Mr. Cohn.
Name is Robert Cohn, Precinct 5.
Go ahead, sir.
On this particular regional schools, my question isn't for the schools. The question is, they do a fantastic job down there.
Well, we're
number-
talking about Department of 411 now.
Wait a minute, hold on.
No, you
I'm
have
sorry,
to.
I'm sorry.
I gotta make
Yeah,
sure-
yes, I do. On the people that do the training or the counseling on drugs, are these people certified now for all these
This is
opioid?
out of order.
Yeah, we're on Department 411.
Hold
Mr.
on,
Green. Development Services, page 36 in the book.
hold on.
36. We'll get to substance abuse, I believe you're talking about. We're doing Department 411. Page 36.
I have no questions on that. My questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay. Well, since that was in the Q&A, anybody else have a question on that department? We're gonna close that. Seeing none, all right, we're gonna move on. Department 411 is now closed. Next up is Department 421. That's on page 37. That's General and Administration. Page 37. This is 421. I have DPW, General and Highway Administration. And I believe a few people held that, and we'll get to them. Let me just give you the names of the town meeting reps that held that. Mr. Scardino, Mr. Anzavino, and Ms. Minor. So let's bring in Joseph Scardino first. This is on page 37, Department 421, DPW, General and Administration. And we're still in the period, we're in the period of technical questions, non-debatable questions.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Joe Scardino, Precinct 1.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just getting to my list of questions, if you'll bear with me. Yes. Through you to whoever can answer this, I know it was brought up before about the new position. Explain the difference between an associate superintendent and assistant superintendent.
Grim?
Sure. So an associate would be a step higher, no different than if you're in a college environment, you have an assistant professor, an associate, and a full, for example. Associate is typically a term used when it's one higher than an assistant and one, if you will, lower than the director level position. So it sits above the assistant position with a broader range of responsibility. The assistant superintendent has a much more narrow range of responsibility.
And the assistant is the person that's there right now?
The assistant would be the person who has been the assistant highway superintendent for a while now, yes.
Yeah, okay, one more final question on that position. My understanding is that person's been in the position for, let's say, decades. And the salary point for that is proposed at $88,577. The new person that has no experience in that department is making about $9,000 more. Can you explain that difference?
Sure, I'd be happy to explain the salary differences. Again, the associate superintendent takes on a vast majority of responsibility. The associate superintendent was our facilities manager. We moved his whole division under DPW. We also, in the past 2 years, have consolidated our whole fleet so that different department directors don't have to try to manage when their cars need oil changes and brakes. And frankly, it wasn't being done and wasn't being monitored. So he'll be taking over the whole fleet maintenance software. He has a much broader set of responsibilities. While he has worked primarily facilities for the town, his background and his resume is much more broad than that. And I think I mentioned that all during my public works presentation. He has a history of runway expansions at Logan, Route 90 tunnel design, Chelsea drainage and runoff projects, a number of 128 projects. Sorry, the cat muted me. So he's very well experienced and has a vast amount of knowledge and sits in a position where he also can do large personnel work. But again, this is part of restructuring. And with all due respect, this was addressed with the IT department. This is part of a restructuring. When I came in, I was offered an assistant town manager. I opted not to just hire one person with a narrow range. I looked at the talent we had in town. And we've been very successful with human services. In fact, that restructuring was very
Dr. Grimm,
lucky.
can we just, I
Okay.
don't mean to interrupt you. I
But
think
that would be it.
you answered the question. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Scardino, you used up your questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You're welcome. Next up is Mr. Anzavino. Can we bring in John Anzavino?
Here we go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Go ahead, sir. Name and precinct number, please.
I'm sorry, John Anzavino, Precinct 4. And it's along the same lines here. The question I'm asking is this: how do you justify a person's salary going from $80,000 in 2018, going up to $94,000 in 19 because of a reclassification, and now going up to $115,000 for FY22? So in four fiscal years, you've gone from 80,000 to 115. And I didn't really get satisfactory answers during the finance committee, so I'll ask it again now. The qualifications that have changed from 2018 to what he's going to be doing in FY22 to justify a 35,000 increase since then, when he's already been increased because of a review of duties back in 2019.
Okay, let her answer the question.
Yep.
But I can't speak to the 18-19 increase, as I was not here for that budget. I will say this, comparably as a facilities manager, at 90,000, he was making about 30,000 less than his counterpart in the school department. So even with the increase, I can understand why they did that, but I can't speak to what directly why that happened. It just makes a lot of sense. But I will tell you now, this is not a raise. This is a restructure and an additional responsibility. There is a big difference. We don't give people $20,000 or $10,000 raises to not take on more responsibility. He's taking on a dramatic amount of responsibility of work that was not being really monitored. We were not monitoring our fleet properly. We were not monitoring the maintenance of our vehicles properly. We have major OSHA compliance. We have a staff member working on it that we have assigned to, and we need somebody with oversight over that in a management position. He will be taking on labor issues. This is a very large department. He is assisting with water sewer. Part of his salary is out of water sewer. He'll be doing highway construction assistance on that side as well. But I have a broadly qualified person, well-educated, with tremendous qualifications and a proven history. And again, with all due respect, this is part of what we talked about earlier. I have the authority under the charter to look at the talent pool that I have and the needs of the town, and I did that. The salary here is still extremely reasonable when we compare it to other salaries around town for equal amounts of work.
All right, thank you, Dr. Grimm. Mr. Anzavino, we got one more question.
No, I don't. That was the only question I really had because we didn't get any other answers at the finance committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Jess Minor. Can we bring in Jess Minor? Miss Minor, when you're brought in, can you please state your name and precinct number?
Jess Minor, Precinct 5. First, Mr. Moderator, just a request, personal request from me. I go by either Jess Minor or Dr. Minor, but
Okay, Dr. Minor.
I don't prefer Miss Minor. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Dr. Minor, go ahead.
Appreciate it. So the question is, the first question, some of my questions have already been asked, so I'm not going to go through those again. But I just want to make sure that I understand the calculations correctly first for anyone looking at the budget, because the associate DPW superintendent position is listed at 0.85 for 97,750, and I believe then the remainder of the funding for that salary, the other 0.15, is being split between water and sewer. So there's a sliver in each of those locations, and so as I believe my colleague just mentioned, the total for the position, the new position, is 115,000. I didn't want folks to think that 97,750 was the total. It is 115,000, and I wanted to confirm that that is correct, and that's also the case going on with the assistant superintendent position. that's listed here at 88,577 at 0.80, and then that is further split between water, sewer, and waste, so that we have to add all of those things up to get to 110,000 for the assistant superintendent position. So first, I just wanted to confirm that my understanding of those calculations is correct.
Yes, yes, Doc Minor, it is. We do that to reflect accurately what is coming out of the enterprise funds, or what, what percentage of work is being done for those enterprise funds.
Okay, and then my second question right now is just simply, is it correct that since we have a volunteer board working on job descriptions, we don't have a current job description for the previous facilities manager position or for the new position that was hired as associate DPW superintendent?
We have started to list the additional duties for the associate, but I don't believe we actually originally had the facilities director position. So all of the work he did with facilities will be rolled into that when we finalize the associate position. Those should all be done, we're hopeful, by June.
By June. Okay, so if we would like to see what previously was the job description and what is now already been hired into in the new position, we should look out in June to find those new descriptions posted.
Absolutely, that group is actively working on that task force that I have is actively working on all of those descriptions.
Thank you.
Okay, you all set, Dr. Minor?
I'm set, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move it on to Robert Cohn. Could we bring in Mr. Cohn, please? And Robert, Bob, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number.
Am I here? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead, sir.
Robert Cohn, Precinct 5. When you mentioned he's in charge of the maintenance of the fleet, are we talking the whole public works fleet?
Actually, let me just back up quickly, Dr. Minor. We do have a facilities
That's
description.
Mr. Cohn.
I know, but we do have a facilities description. I can get her. And
Jesus.
Mr. Cohn, it's not only the fleet, but we're talking about the cars that are in engineering, the cars that are in building inspections, any pool cars. We are all consolidating under one central software, so we can monitor the whole town fleet with the exception of fire trucks.
How about rubbish trucks? How about plow trucks and all that stuff? Pickup trucks. Is he in charge of all that?
He'll be working. He's not obviously going to be doing the mechanical work.
No, I understand that.
But as far as the software and looking at what trucks needs, what we need, what maintenance, what we're due, looking at the capital plan on when we should be purchasing, what trucks need replacement, he will have a lead role in that. Yes.
Well, I'd like someone to look at the maintenance for the rubbish trucks in the past 8 months, and we jumped to $100,000 in 8 months because the fleet is old. We have rubbish trucks, 93, 96.
Is there a question there? Mr. Cohn, is there a question?
Yes.
Ask
This
the
whole
question.
fleet is old and tired. How are we going to fix this?
Well,
we're running with 6 rubbish trucks now. One of them has a frame crack. The engine that we had that we bought last time.
Mr. Cohn, what's the question?
The question is, what are we going to do with it?
All right, let Dr. Grimm answer your question.
So absolutely, Mr. Cohn, the rubbish trucks and maintenance of those will be looked at. By the way, police cruisers as well, all of the cruisers. But for the rubbish trucks, we do have one in the capital for purchase. We are asking to purchase 1 rubbish truck. And part of the restructuring is that Mr. Fitzgerald, who is the superintendent of highway, DPW, has been assigned to take a large look at our whole trash process once we get it away from the curb and where we take it. So we're looking at not only our fleet, but our actual operation, because you are correct. This is a significant problem that we have.
And you better look at plowing too, because you got fleets there.
Yes.
You have trucks 42 years old, 37-year-old.
Mr. Cohn, you had your 2 questions. I'm going to move on. Thank you so much for your questions. Next up is George Stalinski.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, George.
Precinct number, please.
Precinct 2, George Stalinski, as I was saying. 2 questions I had on the salaries on the foreman that's gone down 16.34% from the prior year. Why is that decrease? Is that a retirement, a new hire, or what?
No, I believe that that had not been properly allocated across departments. We had to go up in one department and down in another. This department's complicated because we have to allocate percentage-wise based on what we expect they do. So we had some foreman positions that look like they went up, but it might be the same person in different divisions within DPW.
Would that be the same for the motor equipment operator craftsman?
There was there was an error in that where that position had been placed and how it had been split. Yes.
All right, so I'll see that somewhere else then, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We all set, Mr. Dolinsky?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Is Joseph McCrisky, Chair of the Select Board?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is one area that I can add to with the background to back it up. This is the type of work that I do in my everyday world. I work with operators of commercial fleets that are much larger than our fleet here in the town of Stoughton, with diverse needs, but primarily large trucks that we have, rubbish trucks, and then more or less in tractor trailers as well. And the reason that we have some of these big purchases, and the reason that we had to put in for another trash truck, and we'll probably be putting in for another one soon after that, is because of the lack of maintenance in some areas. Not to lay blame on anyone, but the maintenance wasn't being done in accordance with manufacturer specifications in some of these vehicles. And the type of operation that we have in our trash trucks are some of the heaviest applications that are out there in the trucking industry. And they need specific maintenance on pressure points with pistons and side impacts on the body, the way it's designed to compact the trash when it goes and picks up the trash roadside. There's a lot of high pressure hydraulic push points that if they're not maintained, they actually just split the body in half or break a piston in half. There's brakes that needs to be done. There's just so many adjustments that need to be done. And one of the previous speakers is correct. We're still operating a vehicle that is dated into the 1990s. And for the amount of mileage and trucks that they have, they're far, far beyond industry standards for replacements of vehicles like that. In the short term that I've been watching this maintenance department, I've seen substantial improvements in that. There's a dedicated staff down at the DPW that know what they're doing, but it took this overhaul of the system done by this individual to bring things together and start us moving forward in the right direction. So I hope that brings a little clarification to the point.
Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. Next up is Neil Vale. Can we bring in Mr. Neil Vale?
Mr. Moderator, it's Neil Vale.
Oh, I'm sorry, Neil Valley.
No worries.
Precinct number, please. What's your precinct?
Precinct 5.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My question's for the town manager. You stated it was within your power to hire within your pool. I just want to know how diverse the pool is, and if you have maybe an exact number of people of color that you considered for this position when you were making your decision.
So again, this was not a new position. That was the restructuring. This was the facilities manager who had added responsibilities put on him. So this is again as part of a restructure, like when we did the development services and human services. So this was internal. We do, again, when we hire for open positions, advertise, and we have advertised in diverse journals, diverse publications. And again, I go back, and Selectwoman Roberts mentioned that we are actively part of the REMAP program, which is an effort to look at diverse hiring because it is a concern. But in this particular position, this was a restructure of somebody who was already in a job. This was not a vacated job that we were open hiring for.
Does that answer your question, sir?
That answers part of my question, but the pool that you stated, I've heard you state it a couple of times. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. That is part of the program that you have that you just stated a minute ago.
REMAP. Yeah, that's an effort that we have to work on diverse recruitment.
So that would be the pool that you're specifically speaking on.
No, when I reference the pool, I'm talking about candidate pools. For instance, when we when we're hiring and we post, I think that probably must be what we're referencing when I say I'm looking for a more diverse candidate pool. We're talking about how to diversify that. And the REMAP grant is part of a program where we have a whole team of our staff dedicated to looking at ways to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're still in the period of technical questions, non-debatable questions. I don't see any more hands up. We're gonna move into pro and con debate, statements, comments. Town meeting reps, raise your hands if you want to participate in this. John Anzavino, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Anzavino, Precinct 4, and Finance Committee member. One of the issues we had with this particular department on Finance Committee, and if you look at that page 7 in the book under Article 16, you'll see that for the general and administration, there was a vote of 7-7 with 1 abstention when this budget was voted. And that's why you see there's no amount of money voted there, because the motion failed. So technically, the Finance Committee did not support this particular budget, the general and administration budget. It failed, and that's why there's no money listed there. And the biggest contention with this was that one position, the associate position. And I just, you know, we seem to have an issue with such large increases over a short period of time. We asked about qualifications, so forth, and we really didn't get any answers for specifics, just that there was a lot of experience. But I just wanted to point that out. If you do look at page 7 in the Article 16 in the budget, you will see that this particular budget was not voted by the Finance Committee. And that was why. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Anzavino. Any other hands? Mr. David Laurie, can we bring in David Laurie? Mr. Laurie, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, please.
David Lurie, Precinct 6. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Go ahead.
I brought up a while back at the beginning of town meeting that the amount of money that our town has available for the budget is a little bit deceiving. We talk about how it's sub 2%, like how, you know, we're down to the bone, you know, cutting our budget so tight, you know, that we could barely get by. And we even get to a situation where the Finance Committee picks up a budget that's not even in balance. So 3 out of the last 4 budgets were out of balance. And it's kind of strange to me. And one of the things I've tried to work out is looking at why we have such a high appropriation against what's actually used. We have a $2.7 million turnback this year. It should be astonishing to everybody in town meeting. It's page 297 in the book. And when you have that much turnback, yet we're still in such a tight budget situation, you have to start to wonder, why is so much revenue available to the budget, regardless of the growth year over year, this sub 2%, if we have so much money that gets turned back that we can't use for the budget? It comes back as one-time money. It's free cash. It can't be just plowed into the following year's budget. It ends up in stabilization, it ends up in reserves, and we never end up using that for things like debt service to buy terrific new projects that the town needs. So when I look at like a situation like a budget, you know, that has, you know, a person who gets a nice increase in their pay, it's almost like, well, what's a town manager to do? You know, they've got all this, they're sitting on all this revenue, and if they don't spend it, it's going to end up coming back as a turnback that they can't use for the following year's budget. So I just, you know, the town's got big problems with the way we handle our revenue. And until we get a handle on that, I can't really get too caught up in, gee, how did the town manager, you know, overspend in a particular person's, you know, salary situation. So we have to get control of the budget before we start to look at these finer points of, gee, you know, how can we really start controlling how we spend against how much revenue we actually sit on? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. Dr. Grimm, you have something brief you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to the past two comments. First to Mr. Laurie's comment. He's right. I agree. We don't like to overtax or overdraw on our revenue, but we follow FinCom and we've reduced our dependence on free cash every single year. I've presented increasingly reduced budgets from the year that I got here. This budget only had a 1.8% increase, which is historically low. There is turn back money this year because once the pandemic hit, I put restrictions on spending. We are running extraordinarily lean. Did I restructure and make some salary changes? Yes, but I absolutely do not take the position, oh, I have money, I need to just spend it. I don't operate that way, and my staff can attest to the fact that they are all under a watch. I have put holds on more purchases until I know exactly why we're buying them. So we don't just wantonly hold on to money. I agree that we don't want to overtax, but I also think that it is important to have some turn back money to bolster our stabilization accounts as our bond rating agencies look at that. To Mr. Anzavino's point about qualifications of Mr. Jaffoon, you want specific, you asked a question. I gave them the night that I presented the budget. He has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Ithaca College. He has done major construction and renovation on drainage projects. He's done the Route 90 ceiling panel reconstruction. He has extensive work on taxiways at Logan Airport. He has done runway lights and electrical work at Logan Airport. He did the Chelsea River Duck Bank crossing, and he has done major 128 projects, and he has supervised labor forces. Those are Mr. Jaffoon's qualifications to move up into the position that I have put him into. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Next up is Dr. Minor. Can we bring in Dr. Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to add a comment in addition to Mr. Ancavino's comments about the FinCom vote on this. Sorry, Jess Minor, Precinct 5, also member of FinCom.
Sure.
And, you know, my comment is just that over the last couple of years, the Finance Committee has been concerned about large increases. I think it's appropriate for us to pay attention to these things. I understand where Dr. Grimm is coming from on restructuring and also working hard on trying to save money through contract negotiations and other sorts of things. In counting up from our annual report, I noticed that we are now up to 193 positions that are over $100,000 for the town. And I think FinCom's basic point is just that it's difficult to, you know, to see these large increases coming in, and it feels sort of at cross purposes sometimes with the attempts to save money for the town when some positions at the high end through the restructurings continue to, you know, sort of garner very large raises. So we also have, you know, kind of a question of fairness on that that's been brought up in our Finance Committee meetings over the course of the past couple of years of meetings. So I just wanted people to be aware that our, you know, our general concern as a Finance Committee is that there's a lot of money that is moving upward and upward, and these are expensive positions that the town has to fund, and, you know, are now they're on the books. They're, you know, we have an extra position here now on the books from a restructuring. And so it is a concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern of the Finance Committee to point these things out. And so I just, I hope that we will, you know, keep these things in mind. My last point is simply that it was hard through the pandemic when we were watching and listening to a lot of our fellow people from the town lose their jobs, not make any money, be asked to take pay cuts, furloughs, and everything else. And you know, we're proud that we didn't have to do that to the people working in our town. But at the same time, people in our town only got raises while the taxpayers were, you know, struggling because they did not actually, you know, get raises, many of them, most of them during this time. So it's a concern. I think it would be good for our town to reflect the difficulties of the time, and we didn't see that happening this year across the board. I don't want it to be too focused just on this one position. Sometimes these become the sort of lightning rod for larger issues, and I think that's the issue here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Minor. I'm going to hear from Cynthia Walsh. Cynthia, please state your name and precinct number.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. I move the question.
Is there a second? seconded by Mr. Steve Cavey. Okay, that means cutting off debate. So we're gonna do this by raising hands. To cut off debate on Department 421, page 37, DPW, General and Highway. Let's clear the hands, please. Clear the hands, clear the hands, clear the hands. Please don't put up your hand yet. Okay, all those in favor of cutting off debate on Department 421, DPW, please raise your hand now, and the town clerk will take note of the count. Ten more seconds. All right, do you have the count? You don't have to give it out, but just, do you have it? Someone count it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's clear the hands. Clear the hands, please. Clear the hands. Please don't put up your hand again, just till I call for it. Clear the hands, please. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your hand now. Town clerk will take the count. 10 seconds. All right, can we clear the hands? Clear the hands. All those that abstain, please raise your hand now. Abstentions? All right. Once we tally the count, I'll have the town clerk report the vote. Go ahead, town clerk, if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To cut off debate, the vote was 120 yes, 5 no, 0 abstentions.
All right, that cuts off debate. Motion passes, 120 yes, 5 no, 0 abstentions. Since there was no motions during the pro and con debate and statements, that department is now closed. We're gonna move on. Next up is Department 422, Highway Construction, and that appears on page 39 of your warrant. Page 39. That's Department 422, Highway Construction and Maintenance. And I believe Mr. Robert Cohn held that. If we can bring Mr. Cohn in.
Can you hear me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Cohn, name and precinct number, please.
Robert Cohn, Precinct 5.
Go ahead, sir.
As we know, after the last town meeting, we haven't used Chapter 90 money to construct roads like streets like Kotlik Street, Posca Street, that are falling apart, and many more. Has anyone got a plan to redo these streets? Because evidently they're not. It's now 5 years and we haven't done any work on these streets. Can someone answer that question?
Dr. Grimm, or whoever you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Fitzgerald is on and can talk specifically to what that money is being allocated for specifically next year on streets, but we do have a paved list of streets based in order of need. And we use our paving money for that based on a paving list, but Mr. Fitzgerald is on that and may be able to answer some more specifically, I believe.
Mr. Fitzgerald, can you identify yourself, please? And if you can answer that question, we appreciate it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Tom Fitzgerald, Public Works Director.
We do have a pavement management program where we actually identify each street based on their needs, and we do follow that. I can say that we have spent a considerable amount of Chapter 90 money in the square the last 2 seasons, upwards of $2 million. So that's an incorrect statement that we have not been spending that money. Those projects were identified and prioritized. We do have we do plan on going to the neighborhoods based on that pavement management program. And if I could speak to any street, if anyone has a question about it, I can see I can tell them where their street sits on that list, what's required of it, and what the plans are.
Mr. Moderator,
Go ahead, Mr. Cohen, you have your second question?
I'd like a list of all those streets that he has a list of that he's gonna prioritize. I think the people of this town, as he said, he spent $2 million in the center of town. Within the last 4 years, we had $2.5 million. Of course, we agreed upon that. I'd like to know where Kotlik, Legasky, you sent a crew down to put tar down. It looks like it's awful. Rocks sticking out of the rock
Mr.
area.
Cohen, I appreciate your passion.
I'd just like to know where these streets rate on the list that he claims he has.
All right, no cross debate. Excuse me, Dr. Graham, hold on.
I'm sorry.
As the moderator, I want to ask.
I apologize.
Can you post your paving management program to the virtual table so we have it? That will
Yes.
probably resolve all of Mr. Cohen's questions and everybody else.
Sure. Yep.
If we can get that posted tomorrow morning, that'd be fantastic. I appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Cohen?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Let me see who's up on the list here. Maximanian, please unmute yourself and name and precinct number, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Zemanian, Precinct 1, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Fitzgerald. Do you have a fund available for repairs that are made during damage over the winter that was done by plows or snow plows? You know, the sidewalk plow is what I meant when I said snow plows.
Mr. Moderator?
Hey, Mr. Fitzgerald, you can answer him.
That's exactly what this department, 422, the funding here is specifically for materials for roadway projects, for repairs, maintenance, and that sort, not new construction.
Yes, I understand that, but there was a large section of the Cape Cod berm chewed up on Low Avenue. We don't have granite curbing on the entrances, and I'm wondering, how do we know if we're on that list?
We can check on that. We can check with the department. I know our Assistant Superintendent makes a list of all those. He travels each quadrant, compiles a list, and we do set out and make those repairs spring and early summer. But the funding for that comes directly from this department.
Correct, I understand that. So with the list you're putting up on the virtual table tomorrow, I might presume that we can look at that to verify, because my understanding was that was just work. It wasn't necessarily repair work or emergency work. Will that list contain all the damaged areas in town that you're aware of?
The list that will be posted on the virtual table will be a general listing of the streets. It'll give a roadway rating score, and there'll be a list of what a guidance of what maintenance or construction is warranted for a street with that surface rating. So the list for plow damage you're speaking of, that will be handled internally.
Yes.
That's not public.
Okay, so how can I get a copy of that list to find out if we're on it? That was my original question.
I can check on that for you tomorrow. I'll see if you're on it, and if not, you will be placed on it.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Zeman, and thank you both. All right, next up is Reginald Nunnally, please. Can we bring him in?
Yes, Reggie Nunnally. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Precinct 1. I've been a town rep for Precinct 1 now just less than 30 days. and I've gotten at least 20 inquiries about Glen Echo Boulevard, where now it's getting to be a safety hazard because people are riding down the wrong side of the street trying to avoid the potholes on Glen Echo Boulevard. It's a real safety hazard because the kids get out of school at 2:30 and they're walking down the street and cars are literally riding down the wrong side of the street. So I think that list will be very helpful for me to respond to the constituents in Precinct 1 in the Glen Echo Boulevard area.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Fitzgerald, go ahead, if you can answer
If I
that.
can respond to that, if anyone has a problem with a pothole, please feel free to call and report it to us. Once we do have notice of a pothole, we have 24 hours to repair that. Otherwise, we're liable for damage to that. So we are very aware of the problems with potholes and the needs to fix them in a timely manner. So please, if you do come across anything, feel free to call and we will respond to it.
I think that you do respond really well to the potholes, but I think that the potholes have been repaired so many times that the street really needs to be repaved in certain sections.
That would be identified in that document we'll post tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nunnally. Next up is Brooke Orojobo. I apologize, Brooke, if I mispronounced that. Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, how do you pronounce your name? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Urojobo.
Orojobo. Thank you very much. No
Thank
problem.
you.
All right, we're gonna move on. Next up is Vaughn Anokian. Can we bring in Vaughn Anokian?
Hello, Mr. Moderator. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to
Mr. Anokian, name and precinct number, please.
Vaughn Anokian, Precinct 4, through you, Mr. Moderator, to any of the previous speakers who can answer this.
Yes, go ahead.
Do we have a status on Farrington Street where there's, it was recently paved, and then I think there was a water leak or something around there, and then the next thing you know, they cut a big hole in there, and I think they fixed it, and then the road collapsed again. There's a big giant hole, maybe, I don't know, 10 inches to a foot deep in the middle of the road.
Mr. Fitzgerald, if you're still on, I don't know if you can answer that.
Mr. Moderator, I'm aware of a water break that was up there. Typically, we let some time pass before we make a final repair to allow for some settling, because if you patch it too quickly, it's not going to be an adequate repair.
Well, it was patched over, and then the area around it collapsed, making a big giant hole in the middle of the street.
Again, I'll have someone check on it tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much.
Is that okay, Mr. Vaughn Anokian?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Grimm, did you have a quick comment? Because
Yeah.
Mr. Fitzgerald been answering the
Yeah,
question.
and I appreciate everybody has interest about individual streets and areas they're familiar with. We are happy to, I will post the pavement management plan online. Anybody can look at where their street falls. And anytime, as Tom pointed out, you have a pothole concern, a street sinking, whatever, just call and we can always find these things out and get an answer.
I know we kind of went down the wrong road here.
Yeah.
On this,
We can do this anytime for people.
Right, appreciate that. Okay. I don't see any more. Actually, I do see a hand. Alicia Rinaldi, can we bring in Alicia Rinaldi, please?
Hi there, thank you. Alicia Rinaldi, Precinct 4. I had a question in reviewing the categories here. I see a big swing in the police details, a request approximately 78% higher from 2020 to 2021. I was wondering if anyone would be able to speak to that.
Yep, that had to do with the rate of details going up generally, contractually. So that's because details are paid separately. So it more accurately reflects, I think we actually may have gone over budget on that this year as well. So we've tried to make it more accurately reflect. And then contractually, the cost of those details did go up a little bit.
Did I answer your question, Alicia?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Order from Bert Duran. Can we bring him in so he can make his point of order? Bert Duran. And when you brought in Mr. Duran, could you state your name and precinct number?
Bert Duran, Precinct 6. I just thought some of these questions are getting out of order, asking about all these streets, but that's.
No, you're right. We went down the wrong road for some reason.
All set. Thank you.
Very much for that point of order. All right, getting back to the budget here. I see no more hands raised. We're gonna do, that was technical questions. We're gonna go into a period of pro and con debate, comment statements. Anything else you'd like to add to that? Do I see any hands raised? Give you 10 more seconds. Okay. John Stefano, please state, D. Stefano, sorry. Please state, when you're brought in, please state your name and precinct number, John.
Sorry, Bob, that's a mistake.
Oh, no problem, John. All right, next up is, I did see David Mullins' hands raised. I think it went back down. David Mullen? You want to bring in David Mullen? David Mullins brought in. Can you please state your name and precinct number, please? All right. I don't see him. I think he might have, Mr. Mullen might have put his hand down. Paul Demuse? Okay. Once we bring in Paul Demuse, Mr. Demuse, if you can state your name and precinct number.
Paul Demuse, Precinct 3. Just a point on that Farrington Street sinkhole. There was a water main break and they repaired that. And there's also a pipe that runs down that street for the overflow of the pond up the top of the street.
Mr. Demuse, I allow some people in the technical questions to get into it a little bit. I try to redirect everybody not to get into the actual roads.
I just wanted to make sure that the superintendent was aware of that other pipe that's also down there, that there could be an additional problem, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Demuse. I'm sure you heard it. Thank you again for your comments. Appreciate it. I think that's it for everything. Nope. Okay, so now I see no more hands raised. We're gonna move on. That department is now closed. We gotta keep moving to the late, it's a little after 10 p.m. Next one is snow removal, Department 421. That appears on page 41 in your warrant books. That's Department 423, snow removal, page 41. And I believe Mr. Cohn, Robert Cohn, held that department, so we'll hear him first. Can we bring in Mr. Robert Cohn?
You hear me, Bob?
Yes, I can. Again, I know
Robert
you.
Cohn, Precinct 5.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
The salt shed that we have at town, up at the town yard up there, I understand it's condemned, dangerous. How much is that gonna cost to fix? And I know you're gonna take that money out of Chapter 90 because it has something to do with roads.
Okay.
Moderator?
Is there is there a question there, Mr. Cohn?
Yeah, I'd like to know how much it's gonna cost. I think it's going out to bid. I think it's condemned.
Okay, let's see. Okay, let me see if we can get that answered.
Yes, so we are replacing the salt shed. It has some structural problems. We're concerned about it under weight bearing next year when snow gets on it. So we are starting the process now so that we can be ready for snow season. We're going, we had gone out to bid. We didn't get anything back yet. We're looking likely at about a $400,000 project, it appears. And yes, we will use Chapter 90 money. We have approval to do that. And, but the bid process, because it is Chapter 90 money, requires a slightly different set of qualifications and approved bidders. But yes, we are in approximately 400,000.
And Mr. Moderator?
Yes, one last question, Mr. Cohn.
This will be ready for the winter season, I hope?
Oh, yes, that is our goal. Our biggest problem right now is getting somebody to bid on it.
I know that,
That's why we're doing it now.
Okay, everybody good? Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Thank you, Dr. Grimm. Next up is George Stalinski.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. George Stalinski, Precinct 2. A quick question on this account, on the snow removal. This includes the plowing of the streets, if I'm not mistaken. And I was just wondering if, when plowing, damage is done to fencing, who's responsible for the repair of that fence? Is it the people who do the plowing, or is it the individual whose property has been damaged?
Okay, Mr. Graham or Mr. Fitzgerald would like to take the question.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Tom Fitzgerald, Public Works Director. That depends on what happens. If the vehicle actually strikes the fence and does damage, it would go with the person or the vehicle that operated to cause the damage. If the snow is pushed against it from the road itself, it's not something that would be repaired by the town. So it would go with the cost of repair would go with whoever did the damage, whether it be us, we would do it, town vehicle, or if it's a contractor, it would go to the contractor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dolinsky, you got one more question?
No, I'm just a little concerned. So what you're saying, basically, if somebody plowing for the town damaged the fence, you have to know who the person was that did the plowing.
Well, Mr. Dolinsky, we're in the snow removal budget.
Right, but that's part of the snow removal. And the damage because of the snow removal. How is this?
It might be liability. Can I have Dr. Graham? Would that be the liability, or would that be out of the snow removal budget?
I think it would depend on the extent of the damage. If it's repairing a little bit of a lawn, for example, that's something we go out and do in the spring. If it was extensive damage, it would be an insurance question.
Okay, Mr. Dolinsky, the answer is if it's extensive, then they have to go out and look at it.
Oh, who would that have to go under, Mr. Moderator? Who would have to look at it to make that determination? Is it the Mr. Fitzgerald or his staff or what?
Yeah, the Public Works would go out and look at it, determine the cause of it, determine who did it, and that would determine the course of action.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dolinsky, Mr. Fitzgerald. Okay, next up is John Anzavino. Please, please focus your questions on the snow removal budget. Mr. Anzavino, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question is, from what I just heard, I just wanted to verify, did I hear that the repair of that salt shed will come from Chapter 90 money?
Yes.
Okay, and do we know what happened, why the walls fell out and everything?
They did not fall out.
I have pictures of it. The wall is gone. Don't tell me it's not falling apart. Never mind. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Hold on. Everybody just take a breath for a minute. Just ask the question.
My question was answered. It's coming from Chapter 90 money.
You all set? Okay, I'm assuming you're all set, Mr.
Yeah, no, I'm all set. I've got pictures of the shed. I know the walls are missing, so that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anzavino. Next up is Mr. Richard Fitzgerald. We're in the period of technical, non-debatable questions. Mr. Fitzgerald, please state your name.
I took my hand on, Mr. Moderator. It's,
okay.
I don't know what to say other than the fact we've got to speed this up.
I know, I'm trying.
I know you're doing a good job, but the questions are just out of control.
Questions. I know.
Thank you.
All right. Is that it?
That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzgerald. All right, I don't see any more hands up. Let's move on to pro and con debates. Any pro and con debates? Time to raise your questions. Raise your hands. Seeing none, I'm gonna say we're closing this department off to further discussion. Next up is Department 426, Fleet Maintenance, on page 43 in your warrant books. Department 426, Fleet Maintenance. The town meeting rep that held this department was Mr. Joseph Scardino. Can we bring in Mr. Scardino, please? Again, page 43 of your warrant books.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Moderator. Joe Scardino, Precinct 1.
Go ahead, sir.
The three lines on vehicle maintenance and operating service, gas, oil, and grease, vehicle maintenance, all a tremendous percentage increases with no notes underneath it. I want to know, it appears as though almost little or no maintenance was done for years, and that's why the percentages went up over 100,000, 328% for in the case of vehicle maintenance. Why is that?
Okay, who can answer that, Dr. Grimm?
Yeah, that's similar, Mr. Scardino, to what happened with electric and gas. We consolidated all of those from different line items. So if you go through different departments, those line items were zeroed. Last year, we did it for a certain few departments. This year, we expanded that into everything from police cruisers to pickup trucks. So what you're seeing isn't an increase in the total number that the town is spending. It's actually about level funded. What you are seeing is a consolidation and a lowering in other departments.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question, Mr. Scardino.
All done. We're going to wait for comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Joseph Piana. Can we bring in Mr. Joseph Piana?
That was a mistake, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all, sir. Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Lugito, can we bring in Lugito?
Lugito, Precinct 4. I don't think it's a bad thing to consolidate these activities into one budget item, but do you also have the ability to take that information and disaggregate it back into the various departments that need these services?
Yes, Mr. Gito, we do. We can keep track of it. And we do keep track of everybody's gasoline use and maintenance costs.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gito and Dr. Grimm. All right, this is technical, non-debatable questions. I don't see any more hands. Let's go in the pro and con debate. Trying to move this along a little bit. Do I see any hands raised? Pro and con debate or other statements? I gotta give you 10 more seconds and we're gonna close this department. All right, Department 426 fleet maintenance is now closed. 426 is now closed. Moving on. Next department I have on the list is Department 433 sanitation on page 44 of your warrant books. That's Department 433 sanitation on page 44 of your warrant books. And the town meeting rep that held this department first was Mr. Robert Cohn. Can we bring in Mr. Robert Cohn?
Bobby, my questions was answered before the meeting today, so I don't have a question.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. We're in the period of technical questions, non-debatable questions. I'm gonna close that part of the debate. We're gonna move into pro and con debate comments, statements, or other information. This is on Department 433. Seeing none, I'm gonna go ahead and close this department. No debate. Department is now closed. We're gonna move on. Next department up that was held, Department 544, Substance Abuse Prevention. It appears on page 52 of the warrant books, page 52. I believe I got that right, page 52. And it was held by Mr. Robert Cohn. Can we bring in Mr. Robert Cohn?
Question, Bobby, Robert Cohn, Precinct 5. The counselors that have these people to guide them, are they trained in right up to the latest in drugs?
All right, let's see if we can get it for you. Graham, go ahead.
So, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Cohn, The actual youth counselors are not part of the substance abuse. That's part of Recreation and Youth Commission. They are licensed counselors. The substance abuse program is actually more, applies for grants and distributes grants, and then also works with Oasis to run substance abuse prevention programs. It is a prevention department. They don't actually engage in counseling. When they do have grant money, the programs they do run do have to fit within the requirements of a grant. We have Janice Bruce and Trish Shropshire overseeing the actual applications of those grants and ensuring that when programs are run, that they do fall within the guidelines of the grantor. But there's no actual counseling done by that substance abuse prevention group.
Thank you.
Okay, you got one more question, Mr. Cohen, if you want to
No,
take it?
that's it. That's it.
Thank you very much. Next up is Karen Clip. Could we bring in Karen Clip, please? Karen, when you come in, please state your name and precinct number. I think you're on the panel, Karen. My apologies. Go ahead.
Under this department, do they have access to what facilities have open bed at specific times as a resource?
Karen, can you speak up a little louder? It's kind of hard to hear with your microphone there.
Eric Clip, Precinct 6. Does this department have access to open beds for facilities for people that are in need of them?
Did you hear that, Dr. Grimm?
Yeah, that substance abuse prevention is not a program where we send people for treatment. This is more about getting into the elementary schools and the schools and doing youth programs. We've asked them to do things like during the pandemic, post options for people who are in AA or NA where they may be able to go for services, but we do not actually refer anybody to beds. This is not like a formal drug counseling program.
Thank you.
Anything else, Karen? You got one more question if you want? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay, Mr. Nunnally, let's bring in Reginald Nunnally. He has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Reggie Nunnally, Precinct 1. I was under the impression that the AmeriCorps program was a federally funded program. Is that coming out of our budget or is that federal funds?
I believe that's grant funded. I think Trish may be on and be able to answer that, or Janice, but I believe that is not, I don't believe those are our funds. But I'll defer to Janice or Trish on that. There's Janice.
Janice, go ahead, Janice. Bruce, go ahead, please. Once she's brought into the panel.
I'm not seeing Janice, but this is Trish Shropshire. I know that we fund $10,800 of our operational budget for that fellow.
Was that originally a grant, Trish? Do you know?
Never. No. But I know that there was 18,000 in there and that wasn't the right amount. We brought it down to the 10,800.
Right. My apologies, Mr. Nunnally. I was not sure on that.
So she's not gonna last here.
So that $10,800, that's actually stipend dollars for that fellow?
It's the contact, it's on there. She doesn't answer the question.
That question again, Mr. Nunnally?
I was saying that $10,800, that's actually stipend dollars for that particular fellow.
For the AmeriCorps fellow.
Yes.
Yes.
For the contract.
So it's for the contract. I'm not getting that. Is that a position that somebody is in or is?
Okay, hang on, Mr. Nunnally. I hear some background, some music going. If no one has their radio or TV going. Please. Okay, whoever it is. Mr. Nunnally, could you one more time so we get
I'm
it?
just asking for some clarity because I know years ago the AmeriCorps program was funded by the federal government and it was a grant program and you applied, and if you were accepted into the program, you got a fellowship person to take that position. but the check was actually cut by the federal government, and it could have changed, and I was just looking for clarification on that.
Okay. So you're asking if that position is funded by AmeriCorps? Could anybody answer that for Mr. Nunnally?
Hi, this is Janice Bruce.
Okay, Janice, go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry, I think I was muted before. So I do know that we do have to pay that amount for a contract. I want to think it might be in kind, that it's just a match kind of thing, but we do pay that fee for the contract. And it is a person that does work with the youth and with Oasis and does a lot of work in the schools as well.
Okay, Mr. Nunnally?
Yeah, I think that sort of clears it up, because I just want to know if those were real town dollars, or like Janice just said, is it an in-kind service match? But
I think it might be in kind, and I'd have to double check on that. But that is definitely something that we fund.
Okay, Rowe has his hand up. Bill, can you clarify some of that for us?
Maybe partial clarification, Mr. Moderator.
Sure.
So Northeastern is the grantee on the AmeriCorps, and we pay Northeastern for the services of the fellowship that comes in. So,
okay. All right.
That's, you see it says NU AmeriCorps on there. We pay Northeastern.
Okay, that clarifies it.
But they're the grantee. So, and I don't know, other than that, I don't know what the terms are.
Yeah. I get it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for answering those questions, Janice Bruce and Mr. Rowe. Thank you, Mr. Nunnally. All right, I don't see anyone else with their hands raised. Let's go into pro and con debate on Department 544, substance abuse. Give it 10 seconds. I don't see any hands raised. All right, we're gonna close that department. 544, substance abuse is now closed. Next up is Department 630, 630, recreation. It appears on page 55 of your warrant. Page 55. Just for FYI, I'm gonna race to get through this budget tonight. We just gotta wrap this up tonight. So recreation, Department 630, it appears on page 55, and Mr. Robert Cohn was the town meeting rep that held this department. Can we bring in Mr. Cohn?
Bob, my question was answered without
Okay,
going
thank
up
you.
through here.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. That was Department 630, 630, recreation. Thank you, Mr. Cohn. We're still in the period of technical questions, non-debatable. I don't see any other hands up. Give it another couple seconds. Seeing none, I'm gonna move on to a period of pro and con debates, comments, statements. Now's the time, town meeting reps, if you wanna have any comments. Otherwise, you wanna close this department. Department of 630, recreation, is now closed. The last one is Department number 913, 913, unemployment. And that appears on page 62 of your warrant books. That's unemployment, Department 913. And town meeting rep Joseph Scardino held this department. Can we bring in Mr. Scardino?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Joe Scardino, Precinct 1. Given the pandemic, the closure of schools, and the fact that the town pays its unemployment directly, I was a bit surprised that that was level funded. I don't know, is the manager counting on using CARES Act money or ARA money, or what? Why is that figure so low considering what happened to our town economy?
Dr. Graham, if you can answer that.
Yeah, I can't speak for the schools, but I certainly can speak for the town side. We never stopped operating throughout the pandemic, so we didn't lay anybody off. We had a few short-term layoffs early on, in the pandemic that actually fell in the current year budget, but we were fully operational. We were one of the few town halls that did not close at all. We split shifts. We had people working from home and people who didn't have other work, part-time employees, instead of laying off, because we would have incurred at least 2/3 of the cost of that layoff because of self-insurance. We instead reallocated them to different areas where we needed help.
Mr. Moderator, this is Dr.
Yeah,
Marcus.
I was just going to ask you, Dr. Marcus, can you comment? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, happy. We also did not lay people off. We paid folks all the way through from last March all the way through now. Schools were not closed. We may have been learning at home in various ways, but we have been open in lots of ways, and certainly open all the way from September through now. So we're proud of that fact.
Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just wanted to make sure that, given the situation the country's in right now, that we had an adequate reserve to pay unemployment claims.
Are you all set, sir?
I am, thank you.
Okay. So that wraps it up that I have for all the department numbers that were held. We try to cover everyone that we know that was held when people put it into the Q&A department number and hold. So now we're going to go back to the article 16, Article 16 that appears on page, well, it's a revised motion. The original article is on page 24. If Dr. Graham, Dr. Marcus, you want to make brief statements, you feel free to at this point in time. Dr. Graham first.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the questions, town meetings, concern and interest, and I want to thank the staff, the town, the people of the town. Dr. Marcus, we were able to put together probably one of the leanest budgets that we've ever, I know, like historically, again, on our end, a 1.8 increase is very low, and we were able to do so without cutting services. And I know Dr. Marcus can speak for himself, but he did a tremendous job on his side as well doing this. And so I want to thank everybody for their patience. We continue to spend very restrictively and limited until we get through the pandemic fully. And again, I want to thank all the town meeting members for their patience and their diligence in reviewing this budget.
And Dr. Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I also would really like to thank the town meeting members for their support of the schools over the years. I know that this has been a very difficult time for everybody, but we are proud and pleased of the accomplishments that we've made as a school district. And with this budget, I know we'll be able to continue to grow. And we thank you for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus. Thank you, Dr. Grimm. I have a raised hand from Cynthia Walsh.
I'd like to read the revised motion and vote on the budget.
I'm going to ask Ed Trumpio to read the motion from FinCom.
That's fine. As long as somebody does it, you've got 1 minute.
Well, I'm going to take the moment here and ask Mr. Trumpio. Actually, I should ask Robin Zoll if she's still on. She would like to have any quick comments on Southeastern Regional Budget School Committee. Robin Zoll, she's the chairperson of that committee. Not sure if she's on. Okay, Ed Trumpio?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Robin Zoll, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I don't have anything to say.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Ed Trumpio, could you read our motion again?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, sir.
Okay.
Read the revised motion.
Yeah, the one that was in the book. All right, that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $108,329,489 for the maintenance and support of the several departments of the town, and that such sum be expended only for the purposes as described, and further, that to meet this appropriation, $103,997,307 to be raised in the tax levy, $2,900,000 to be transferred from free cash, $71,543 to be transferred from Title V receipts reserved for appropriation. $52,017 to be transferred from the Cedar Hill Fund retained earnings. $250,769 to be transferred from the Public Health Fund retained earnings. $481,081 to be transferred from the Sewer Fund retained earnings. $1,432 to be transferred from the FY 2022 Sewer Fund Reserve. And $575,340 to be transferred from the Water Fund retained earnings, for a total of $108,329,489.
Second.
Okay, Cynthia Walsh, thank you very much. She seconded it, precinct 2. And we also already had the finance committee reports, but say it one more time, Ed.
Finance Committee report, we voted 13-1 to recommend approval to town meeting as set forth in the proposed motion.
And Cynthia Walsh, could you read the municipal operations recommendation?
Municipal Operations Committee voted 6-0 with 1 abstention to recommend approval to town meeting as set forth in the proposed motion.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Ed. Okay, we're ready to vote on this. Pretty much we discussed all the budgets. I don't think there's anything to discuss anymore. So let's vote on this matter. Please put the poll up. The poll is before you. Article 16, General Fund Operating Budget. Please vote accordingly. You have 25 seconds. Okay. Let's end the poll now and share the results, please. And I'm gonna ask the town clerk to read the results.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vote on the general fund operating budget is yes, 114, no, 14, and 1 abstention.
All right, as read by the town clerk, the motion passes. 114 yes, 14 no, 1 abstention. Cynthia, do you have another question?
Yeah, would you repeat that? I can't hear Stephanie.
Okay, Article 16, General Fund Operating Budget passes. The motion passes. 114 yes, 14 no, 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, before we move to adjourn, Trish, would you like to say anything about, we have to come back on Wednesday? Okay. The IT department said that she will send out the link on Wednesday during the day. So look for the link for on Wednesday, which is the 12th. Okay, Mr. Delinsky, you can go
Yes,
ahead with.
Mr. Moderator, George Delinsky, Precinct 2, I move to adjourn tonight's meeting and reconvene on Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mark Zemanian. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. Okay, just bear with us while we get the final tally. Motion to adjourn. 10 more seconds. Are we good? Okay, clear the hands, please. Clear the hands. I'm sorry, I know IT's trying to get the hands cleared. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Okay, clear the hands. All those abstain? Seeing none. All right, could we have the town clerk read the results, please?
Yes, the results to adjourn tonight's meeting is yes, 110, no, 0 abstentions.
All right, the meeting is now adjourned. The motion passes. Yes, 110, no is 0, abstentions 0. Thank you all. Everybody did a great job tonight. We'll see you on the 12th. And you can log in early again, 6:30 PM, and we'll be on Zoom again. Thank you all. Have a good evening.